4:30, Monday, October 30th, work session, Thomas J. Smith Chambers. We're going to just go right down the agenda. First, we will have Eric present about a hearing for consideration of sale of property at 255 South Central. And then, if you want to, you just go right ahead into the 251 also. 2 in a row, 255 South Central and 251 South Central.
These are properties that we've acquired and had for a few years now at 255 and then 251 just to the north of that. We have had interest from the current owner of 253 South Central that lies in between them of acquiring both of those lots. We have notified all adjacent property owners as well and sent notice within 200 feet. To let them know that there is interest and to see if there's other interest, particularly on 255 from the neighbor to the south. Mohammed Naruzi does own the lot in between and would like to acquire both of those lots. He did submit bids on those. He would, I think, like to have discussion with council on whether 500 for both of them, since they are just adjoining lots there. So that would be a discussion, or see if any other bids come forward. So
500 each or 500?
Total. Yeah.
But there are two separate full
There's
lots.
two separate lots. The 251 is a very small lot. Doesn't meet our current standards for lot size. It's less than what our minimum lot size would be, so it's not a buildable lot.
Is that the lot that we planted some trees on? Or is it-
Yeah, yep.
Anything else?
Nothing further on those.
I don't know, maybe not 500 for both, I know. But maybe some sort of a discounted since it is not a lot that you could build on. If he were to get purchased of.
Is the other lot buildable?
Yeah, technically it is. It's still a smaller lot than typical, but and having double frontage is not allowed by current code, but it has frontage on the front and back, which makes it unusual. So
Unique.
yeah, unique.
Well, so what do you think? Sell them?
Well, yeah,
Get rid of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
absolutely.
That's one of my goals has been
Yeah, we don't want to mow them
get
anymore.
rid of these
don't want 'em.
properties. Yeah.
By all means.
All means, okay. All right.
When would we need to make the decision about, I guess, price-wise? Would we just do that during the meeting? During the sale?
Given that you're gonna be doing one at a time, it's gonna be kinda hard for you to do that.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think I'd probably recommend you go with your typical minimum
Okay.
price on each lot.
That makes sense.
All right.
Let's be consistent.
Can you communicate that, or?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, next, we also have a public hearing for sale of property at 506 South Gunnison. Mike, is this okay now? Yes, we're okay. You're okay up there? All right, okay. All right.
Again, this is a property we acquired more recently through the abandoned building program. The house was in a condition that did need demolished, failing foundation and house. This again has a bid from adjacent neighbor. Again, Mohammed owns a property to the south of this. We have notified all adjacent neighbors and everyone within 200 feet. It is a buildable lot. The conditions remain for the ones as before, either combine with adjacent lot under their ownership or construct a house within 180 days.
Okay. Same deal?
Sounds good.
Same deal? Okay. All right, moving along. Consideration of ordinance, amending ordinance number 3151, prohibiting the construction of wells within the city for use as potable water source. First reading.
This ordinance change is very similar to one that we had previously this year. The map up here shows you a known contaminated site that's been monitored by Seneca, and it is something that they're ready to move forward on as far as pulling their equipment. In order to do that, we need to make this area unavailable for non-potable wells. And so if you throw up the next map, in the ordinance, I describe the boundaried area seen here, and non-potable potable wells would be restricted wholly in this area.
That's that Burlington northern site?
This is
Correct.
that area that we've been talking about?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this map still has the buildings on it.
Yeah, old aerial.
Questions, council?
No questions. Except how is it pronounced? I know, right?
Well, the wastewater treatment plant supervisor and I get in a conversation about that, but I always say potable.
Potable.
He says potable, but
It's potable.
It's potable.
So that's,
non-drinking water.
that's where I got the potable because, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
You know.
Levity to start with. Okay. Whew, all right. Oh, that's a good reminder. Turn off your cell phones, please. Thank you. Next, we have a public hearing, consideration of ordinance amending various sections of Chapter 31, Riverfront Advisory Committee, the Burlington City Code.
This is a change, as was discussed, brought forward through a memo from Ryan Gorley, our park superintendent, reducing the number of members on the Riverfront Advisory Committee from 9 to 5, have had difficulty maintaining membership and attendance at the meetings, and then changing the language that states the park superintendent or designee shall serve as the sixth member of the committee as ex officio instead of the city manager. And then adding under powers and duties, submitting an annual report to the city council. That was discussed as a desire of council as well. So annually, they'd submit a report to the council summarizing activities and accomplishments and meetings.
Currently, there's nine-member board. And
Correct.
I see there's 2 vacancies,
I believe,
It might even be 3.
yeah,
maybe 3.
And then there's one that we just reappointed, and we have 2 that are up for subject for reappointment at the beginning of January, or maybe it's the beginning of February
yeah,
1st or
coming
so.
up soon.
All right, so one
So
of
we
them-
just looked to not fill one of
One
those.
of them would have to be off, okay. Okay, council, that
It's good.
work for you?
It's fine with me.
All right. Okay, now we're gonna talk about no parking zone on the 1500 block of Sioux Street on the north side of the street.
This area will look familiar. Within the last month, we had brought up a no parking on, unfortunately, I doodled on this one and I didn't grab a different copy. In the areas where there's the lower red and then the adjoining up north mark, those are currently no parking zones made by a previous person requesting that. Now we have another property owner in the area that's requesting no parking on the south side. Becomes kind of a little bit of a neighborly conversation on what's going on there. Public Works had a communication with the fire department for access purposes. They were able to fit in, but had a little difficulty potentially backing out. So Public Works doesn't really have a recommendation on this item.
Oh, really?
Rather that if it's in best interest of public safety, that it probably should be no parking
On the north side.
on the south side, or north side. You're right. I don't even know my resolution. I apologize.
Okay, so no parking on the north side.
Correct.
And this all comes about because of that, this is a relatively new house there
Yep, and then there's a one being built currently on the southern lot.
at 1505.
Okay?
And so really only, house affected is 1508, correct?
Correct. I mean, I think there's quite a bit of parking that has gone on that north side from adjoining property owners, but with the new houses being built, I think that's probably added a little bit of a change to that neighborhood.
Yeah. Does Chief Truxell have anything on add to this? Or?
So like Nick said, best case scenario, there'd be no parking on the north side, but there is only 2 houses past that point. When cars are parked on both sides, it is tight, but the remainder of the street going to the west, it's parking on both sides too. So it can be tight there, but what you have going on the other side is you have 2 ways to get in and out, where
Right.
this particular place, it was kind of weird how we allowed them to build the 2 houses on a kind of a weird dead-end street. There's no turnaround there. So it's basically we pull ahead and then you back out. There's no way to turn around a fire truck in there or an ambulance. So the risk is small if you couldn't get in there. I mean, we couldn't stretch hose from a fire truck, you know, push the cot from the ambulance to get to those 2 houses. So if it was a 20-acre or a 20-lot subdivision, it'd be totally different, you know, but
Yeah.
so. Yes, it would be good not to have the parking.
Yeah, that's
but
my,
that's-
yeah,
all right.
okay. Well,
And I guess the reason why we say Public Works doesn't really have an opinion, because there are 2 property owners that do not want the parking change, and another one that does. And it was just the vice versa of what happened previously, so.
So the one that wants it is the one who owns that adjacent?
I'm not sure, I think it's 1505.
yeah, the one that's building the new house.
Correct.
They want that, but 1508 does not particularly want that?
Nor 4.
Yeah, and the difficult thing with, as you get staff, asking staff whether it makes sense or not, we have an awful lot of locations within the community where we have streets of this width that have parking on both sides, and it becomes an issue anywhere for getting vehicles through.
Exactly.
And from a staff perspective, we know that this is similar to what we see in other places, and we try, from a staff side, not to get in the middle of these things. We understand the pros and cons, but
Well, I guess I think at 1508, if they wanted it, that would be different, but if they don't, then if they have people visiting them, they have to park somewhere else and walk over to the house. I mean, they can't have, you know, like Christmas, they're not gonna be able to have their family park out front or anything.
But there's nobody across this, there's no house across the street from them who would have vehicles, right?
Well,
There's no other house that
well, I
faces
guess
it.
they could park across there, yeah.
Yeah, there's no house on,
There'd be one side they could park on. Yeah, I see what you mean. The other one faces the
Yeah.
Zachary.
right. I guess I'd be inclined to go with public safety,
Yeah.
be my
Yeah,
issue.
well, and you're right on that, so it would be, it's not like there would be no parking there.
It's hard to go against the fire department.
Yeah, that's my feeling. Okay, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Chief. We ready to move on then?
Yeah.
Okay. Next is a resolution authorizing the preparation of an application for funds from the Section 108 loan program from Iowa Economic Development Authority for a project at 816 Valley Street. Eric?
This is a request, again, from 816 Valley Street, which is the former Dial Building owned by Kelly Hull, to look at the Section 108 loan program. This is a program that secures loans with future allocations of CDBG funds. They provide a source of financing for a variety of different projects that do go through the city as the applicant. It must be a general local government with loan amounts ranging, or between $1 million and $10 million. They provide a below market rate loan for certain projects. There is a minimum recipient match as a percentage of the total activity that's required. Designed to provide gap financing necessary to bring together public and private entities and collaborative efforts, rehabilitate, renovate, and reuse or vacant or underutilized buildings. Residents of the new units must be at least 51% LMI, so it's similar to the TAMA project. At least 51% have to be low to moderate income for the period of affordability. So IEDA looks for a backup source of repayment from other sources. The most competitive applications have local government being the guaranteeing repayment. So that would be, if that were the case, that'd be the city guaranteeing the loan. There is a project questionnaire portion that was included in the packet that gets submitted to IEDA for their consideration of project eligibility. That has not been fully completed or submitted to IEDA for their consideration of project eligibility and viability at this point. It's been partially completed, but I think Kelly is here to talk about our project, but that's kind of a summary of what the program is. A couple of the components being the low, moderate income housing, potential for the city to be the guaranteeing agent of it, or if it can be a pass-through, a sole pass-through from the applicant through to the state. Do you have anything to add on that, or?
Guess the only thing I'd mention, if it was a pass-through, then it would function, and this is similar to CDBG funds, and it would be similar to what was done with the TAMA project, where we were the sponsoring entity. We have no liability in that project. If we were guaranteeing the funds, that would be the first time the city has done that, and it would make me very nervous. We'd need to make sure that if you were to do that, you'd want to see that there was adequate value to collateralize it. I mean, if you look at the IEDA's application, they would prefer to see a bank collateralization on as their preferred backup, and I understand that because you want to be able to see that you can cover your risk, and it just council would need to know what the risk is that you're looking at there, and it's something that we've never done. Well, I don't know. We've done something comparable probably back in the 1980s with CDBG funds with what was the project out there?
Is it the Greenway or Stone Gardens project, or the Newberry?
The Newberry Village.
Yeah, yep.
There was a 30-year loan that was forgivable with that project. What we've done over the last few years has not been that type of financing. It's been more that what we've offered as a match to projects has typically been the advanced tax abatement for the downtown area. We've moved away from offering any funds or security on projects. That being said, you can certainly change as time goes on. And again, just to note, this would be 50% LMI, and it's a matter of where the council wants to be at this point. You did do the TAMA project when that was brought up, but you've had a couple of others that you've denied on the same basis because you felt that you've raised a concern about how much LMI you can have in the area. But those are previous applications, and that's up to you to make a decision. How do you feel is what you think is the appropriate mix at this time? And then I think it does make sense to have Kelly come forward and talk about what she's looking to do.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. To address the LMI, low to moderate income, it says when adapted, reused, converted on upper story units. So this 108 is specifically for upper story renovation, which I think is a perfect use for Dial. It talks about 51% of all of the units must be to households at 80% of the area median income. And to address the issue about the bank, I have the application here, and really, they don't have any area to put down a bank. This is where the city would be the applicant, and I believe it's 5 to 7 years. Is that right, Eric, on the financing terms?
I think
7 to 15 years. But I would be using this as bridge funding for the tax credits on historical, federal, and state. So it would be probably a 5-year bridge loan to fund those, and I'm going to basically sell those tax credits to come up with the funding. I'm going to need, probably around the same $9 million that Tama got. So I have to use CDBG. Otherwise it doesn't make sense, including the workforce housing credits, the federal and the state. So I would need this funding to make this project a go. And there's a few other state programs that economic development has offered, which all are city-sponsored. All of them are in CDBG.
I guess I have.
They're city-sponsored, they're not a
not
loan
guaranteed.
guarantee, which is different. We don't back, if, for example, in the Tama project, if their project is unsuccessful, we don't back the CDBG money that they received.
I think that's workforce, the workforce CDBG.
Even the CDBG
Yeah.
funding that they got with it. But
There's also another program that I would like to apply for in tandem, which I don't know if it had been placed on the agenda or not, but I asked to have it placed, which is the nuisance abatement program, where the city would not have to back it. But you still have to apply as a city. So,
I don't know if you've received that, Eric, or not.
I didn't receive an application or,
I've been working with Charlie on that, so I'm not sure if the state actually has that application available, but they do have the funding available, and there's $5 million in funding, and the city would not have to back it. So I'd like to at least apply.
I guess I need to understand what is the total project cost?
Well, that would be how many units that we're going to
But
place.
do you have the dollar total amount of?
I'd have to have that from an architect.
Pardon me?
I would get that from an architect, from a historic architect. So once we have the funding, which is coming through grant funding from the state of Iowa, then we determine how many units will be in the upper floors, second and third story floors. I'm guessing approximately 70 to 100 units. So based upon square foot on,
It's usually about $100,000 a unit,
yeah, about that.
because I've developed some, and so I guess I'm familiar with some of this, but some of the things are, to me, I guess I need to get clearer, or need to think, or need to believe that you understand it, I guess, but I don't, having done some programs with upper story development, you have to have bank funding. You have to have a certain amount of bank funding, because the tax credits, you don't get any of that money until the project's completely done.
I'm aware of that, yeah.
And it's great on the state, 25%, but the federal, they have to be owners. And so you would have to, it's not that you just sell them, different programs are different. On the federal
I can
tax-
syndicate them.
but they have to be owners. They have to be listed as an owner of the property.
Okay.
And so I don't know how that would be, then if we are backing, I guess the whole thing of ownership is kind of confusing to me,
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with who you are. Could you introduce yourself?
Becky Anderson.
Oh, yes, we spoke.
Okay, and
Perfect.
I've developed
Bent
401 and then
River.
515, 517. But the programs I used were through IED, and they were per unit. The other thing with IED, that they are income-based, there's quite a bit of paperwork every year to go through
Yes.
to make sure you get that.
Yes.
But what I looked at your application, and it seemed very incomplete to make a decision on, because I've applied for funds, and I had to have a letter of credit from a bank. I had to have,
They didn't ask me for any of that. I have the application here, and you can read.
well, I think
if
it did
anybody-
ask for a letter of credit from a
No,
bank.
it didn't. I have the application right here, so I don't know if you have the same
Well,
application I turned in.
But they will ask for pro forma and,
No problem.
Yeah.
My husband's MAI commercial.
well, I think.
We could do
I
that.
guess I'm thinking we should look at that. You should bring that to the city to look at before we make a decision.
Well, basically, the city has to apply to, as you know, to the economic development, the state of Iowa. So if we want to even go forth with this and secure any funding, the city would have to apply. So they're not asking for a pro forma, the state is not.
Well, I
But
find
we
that,
would be.
yes, we should ask
Honestly,
for
I
one.
cannot, given the information here, I can't see how we can put ourselves out there as liable for $1 million
Okay.
to $3 million.
No problem. Then it should have been placed on the agenda for the nuisance abatement, which the city would not be on the hook for, so to speak. And that's the nuisance abatement loan program, which is the same exact program.
I'm just looking
I don't
at
think
what
we
have.
got any information.
I'm just looking at what we have here.
Yeah. So both of these applications, the 108 and the nuisance abatement, the city is going to be the applicant because that's how the state works, as you know.
I like the idea of that building being redeveloped, but
I think we all would.
yeah, it's been too long. I
Yes.
just I can't see how we can approve
So what exactly did the city approve for Tama?
that. You'd have to ask Eric.
You did a resolution of support on the,
Work- Well, on the workforce housing and on the CDBG.
they did the applications, and I don't know who
Which
they
s-
worked through with that, but.
Which
uh,
CDBG, Eric?
There's some flood money left over from the 2008 flood that carried through forward.
We did read
This,
They probably went through regional
Yeah.
planning on that.
regional.
yes, I remember that. Thank you for the jog, the memory jog. Well, I'm happy to do pro forma if that's gonna,
And I think we
How-
need sources and uses too.
sources and uses.
Yeah.
Uses of the building, you mean, or?
No,
I'm sorry.
sources and uses, sources of funds and how you're going to use those funds.
Okay. Well, all of that will be through the architect that I'm hiring. So the architect is going to give a budget in all of the submittals. And then at that point, I'll know exactly how much funding I would need. And since you've gone through this, Ms. Anderson, I'm sure you know it's quite complex. And 25% and 20% respectively is on how much money you're going to spend. So that's just always the $1 million question,
It's on how
so to
much
speak.
you actually spend.
Yes, how much you
And-
actually
And
spend.
you have to follow through and do everything correctly. But that 20% is a little bit a question now, whether that's, that's one of the things on our agenda too, because they are talking about maybe doing away with the 20% federal tax.
That's why time is of the essence.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So here's the application. Has everybody reviewed the application? Have you seen a copy of it?
It's in our
Mm-hmm.
packet.
Okay. Where, Ms. Anderson, did you say that it asked for a letter
Well,
of credit?
Let me get to it here.
It doesn't. The
No.
Well,
very
that little
first part of it
question-
does say that, that it does,
Are we
all
talking-
loans require adequate security to ensure loan repayment. The background materials that, as the state's done presentations on it, their ideal is to have a letter of credit be that from the
Okay.
bank.
Okay,
but
let me
The
get to that
applicant-
point that I was
It does
looking at.
require adequate security.
The applicant, I spoke with the state along with Charlie on a conference call. And so the city themselves is the applicant. So that would be from the city, a letter of credit from the city's bank, I assume, because the city's the applicant.
You could certainly do that. That would be the first time that you've done that.
Yeah.
So
Another question I had, the building and land is the collateral.
It could be, sure.
Well, that's what you say here.
Well, I mean, I was filling it out as I was the applicant because I was unaware that the city had to be the applicant. So when I sent this in, it was just the dummy version to Charlie, and then he.
So
Yeah.
what's the appraisal on the building and land right now?
Well, that is a very good question. Right now, the value is replacement costs, and it's multi-million right now just in replacement costs. But is that the true highest and
Yeah, that's.
best use?
Yeah.
No. That's, it would be the renovation and the upper story development that would create the highest and best use for valuation on that property.
Well, I think to get that value, you would have to spend this money to get that value.
Yeah.
Spend,
Spend
Well,
money
and-
on the building to get that kind of value, but the
Yes.
value now
Yes.
is what?
well, the value now is replacement cost, Ms. Anderson.
Well, the value now, I'm talking about the market value now.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not replacement cost.
Well,
The tax information to 2017, the building is worth 21,000 and the land is 12.
Well, I don't see anything here.
That's just the question.
Yes.
That's the answer to the question.
I'm very familiar with the tax assessments and things like that. However, I don't find any commercial real estate in downtown that could go for under $500,000 with the Terrace Real Estate Group who's selling all of it.
Well, I don't know. I tried to sell my building that's completely done for $425, and I didn't get an offer on it.
Which one was that?
401 Jefferson.
Oh, by the church. Near the church?
No, on the corner, 4th and Jefferson, 401.
Okay.
Well, bottom line for me is that I don't see how we can approve that we're gonna put ourselves out here for be liable for this without complete information.
We need more information.
Yes, I think that's the bottom line. We need more
Okay,
information.
what other information do you need on this application to fill it out, to even see if they would approve it, the state?
Well, this whole page here is blank, and with all these estimates and how much, what the budget is, and I don't see how you're even gonna get
Okay,
the
well,
state to look at this without this information.
that will not be a problem. As I stated, we have a commercial appraisal company, so my husband being an MAI, we can easily do that, and the performa that you need.
Well, my point is that it seems way too preliminary to have this on our agenda, to even think that we could approve this.
Well, I
Plus,
can,
the other question being raised is, are we okay with 51%
Right.
LMI?
And do you want to guarantee a loan?
Yeah,
On a
I don't.
project.
Well, to me, that's the
I'm
big
not gonna
question,
guarantee a loan.
and that's why I'm asking for more information. I mean, not for this application, but if, I feel like you're applying to us to guarantee a loan, and so that if you're asking us to guarantee a loan, we should ask you for certain financial information,
Exactly.
like a pro forma, and sources and uses, and a letter of credit from the bank, and we need to do a
Sure.
credit report. I mean,
sure.
you know, you're talking about,
Sure.
and I find it hard to believe that we
The
really
state
have
is
to do that.
asking if the money were to be used, that the city of Burlington be the credit application, and they fill out all of this. But I can fill out, conventional bank financing, local government funds, how much I'm going to be asking for. That's fine. This is just the first go.
Well-
Really, what it comes down to for me is, do you want to back it or not? Because if not, I'm not going to do the work. What I will do is come back with the nuisance abatement, which the city does not have to back, but you're still the applicant.
That's fine.
I think that would be
Personally,
better.
Personally, I'm not interested in being the backer of a loan. I'm not.
No problem. So then maybe I should be put on the agenda for the nuisance abatement package, which the city is still then the applicant.
Which would be similar to the CDBG.
But
It is CDBG.
We still don't, we're not the ones that typically fill those out. We usually, any of those projects that have come to us, the sources and uses have been filled out by the developer, whether they've used
I'm happy to
Southeast
fill them
Iowa
out.
or whoever to help them
That's
with
no
that.
problem. That's not what the state told me. That's why I didn't do it. They told me that the city was to fill that out. But it's no problem.
Okay. Well,
Great.
so we're clear now.
Yes,
This particular one, we're not interested in.
that's fine. I'll be placed on the agenda for the nuisance abatement. And they also offered me a community catalyst grant. The state did. So I'll be placed on the agenda for that. But further on down the line, I did ask for a letter of support for the historic credits. That's item number, I believe, 14 on the agenda today.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay,
Um,
okay. Did anybody have any other
That-
questions?
That's not that.
That's not that. That's not that.
Oh, that's not that.
Yeah. I was
That
gonna
has
say
to
that-
do with the federal tax credit program, but it's different than your specific request.
Okay, so I would need a resolution of support for the CDBG funding, similar to what you did for TAMA, in order to receive the workforce credits in CDBG.
Again, I think that they worked on the TAMA one. Did they work with Southeast Iowa specifically, Eric, or do you know?
Well, that application's directly through the state, and our match is, I think, 1% or 1,000 per unit, and we just.
We use the
our
tax abatement program.
So, It's just a
So
standard.
what we've had on that in the past is when a developer is putting together their application for CDBG funds, they have gotten a resolution of support for the CDBG application.
Yes.
And we can do that when you're in a spot where you have an application that's
I
ready
have
to
an
go in.
application that's ready to go.
So when Eric gets a copy of that, he can
Okay.
work on the resolution to go with that.
Okay. So would I need to be in attendance for that meeting, or?
It's anytime that you have something that you're asking for the city to partner on, it's just recommended. You don't have to be, but it's recommended.
Okay. So there is the economic development set aside, Eric. That's 48877, which is also CDBG. That's another pool of funding that the state has offered. So that's $1 million grant application that will be coming through. So it may be multiple letters of support. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I wish you well on that project. Okay, we ready? to move on, Council? Thank you, Council. All right, resolution approving agreement between the City of Burlington, Iowa and the American Music Festival Group. Okay.
So after, we've had a few different discussions that have gone on, and I don't know how many different drafts we've gone through to try to get to where we have something to put before you. From the last time that we talked about it, the agreement that's in here is for the 3 years. It identifies the $250,000 annually, with $125,000 paid each 6 months, beginning January 1, 2018, as well as a $35,000 payment up front to allow for some operating capital and to do some equipment purchases. It outlines responsibilities for each party, as the majority of which have been discussed already. There are some duties that were listed as Exhibit B. They've been put at your spot, and that really has to do with who's responsible for what with each of the different facilities. Primarily, the city is responsible for all the property maintenance type activities, capital improvements. If, for example, the elevator needed to be repaired or the HVAC system needed repaired, we're the ones who are responsible for things like that. The day-to-day cleaning, setup, tear down, duties such as that are AMF's responsibility. Outlines insurance requirements, all that wonderful stuff. Naming rights was something that was brought up at the last meeting that wasn't outlined in the contract, and so that has been put in here. There's a section under AMF's responsibilities, Section I, that talks about the need for AMF to consult with the city, either through the council for buildings themselves or with city staff for, if it were to be an interior room or something, or an event, I guess, for naming rights, making sure that the names were appropriate. There's a division of revenues on events. For legacy events, those that have been in the buildings for a number of years, all of the rental fees would go to the city. There's a division for non-legacy or new events that would occur, as well as for naming rights. Naming rights, we put in at the same 20-80% split, 20% city, 80% AMF, as what had been discussed for their new events or new rentals or events that were to be held. Put that in there primarily because that was the only percentages that we'd been talking about. That was never brought up as to what the split would be on those, but it made sense that seeing that's how the splits were with the other items, that at least what was presented was listed here with that same type of split. And talks about how payments would be made from AMF to the city. It would be on a quarterly basis. potentially be able to go to a semi-annual over time, if it seems to be working to all of our interests to be able to figure out how we can do this and keep up to date. I did put in an item in here that wasn't discussed at the council level. There's the section I, contingency regarding change of use. Given that we've had discussions about how that facility will be used long-term at different levels over time, and this contract has some language that allows for automatic renewal, I wanted to have some ability over time to give the council the flexibility to, if you wanted to have a change of what goes on down there with that area, that there was some way for a provision in here to provide notification and allow you to have a transition occur. So you see that after the first 3 years, if something were to happen with the change of use of that area, that could occur subsequent to a 120-day notice procedure being given to all parties. Something that we hadn't talked about but wanted to make sure that we were clear on, since we're not just talking about the auditorium as we had been in previous agreements, but have the port and the depot in here as well, we've had other entities who already rent from us or have contemplated rental. So we had to think, how are we going to add that language in here? So we have some language in here that rents from, say, the Iowa store. If we were to have Amtrak lease space from us, if the restaurant, Greer's Restaurant, were to be developed, those rentals would all be done with us specifically. It wouldn't be subject to a split of revenues. And it also kind of goes into the line of, as you look at the duties of that we'd be asking of AMF for cleaning, the auditorium itself, they have full responsibility for cleaning. When you look at the duties for the depot, their duties for cleaning down there would be only in regards to special events that were to occur at the facility. We would have to contract, as we currently do, or clean ourselves for that area, and it makes sense. It's kind of what we've kind of contemplated. If Greer's were to be able to move forward successfully with the restaurant down there, they'd be paying some CAM charges, common area maintenance, to cover our cleaning costs for those areas. And I think that kind of covers as much as I can think of, and maybe we want someone from AMF to come forward and say how they feel about what we've gone through with negotiations on this and what's being presented for council for consideration.
Before that, can I ask a question? We had conversation about the naming policy, and you mentioned there's a policy.
It's not a good enough policy for, as we went and looked at it, it doesn't match what I'd want.
I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to know. All right.
Casey Fleming, 3606 Memorial Park Road, Burlington, Iowa. I suppose our only comment right now is timing is becoming of the essence, and I think we've done a lot of due diligence, as well as the city and all parties involved. So it's something we're eager to get started on, and I think that we're in full agreement with the way the verbiage stands as negotiated. And we've got phone calls for events next year, and a lot of them are going through Mike O'Neill and the current venue work staff, and they're hoping to be able to have some answers soon. So I think that we're very hopeful that we can get a yes vote next week based on things as they stand. I suppose the only other update since the last time we were here, in addition to the verbiages that changed in the contract, is we've met with 4 other folks that would be potential executive directors, all of which have varying degrees of experience in the industry. All 4 bring a lot of excitement and varying levels of experience, and they're hot to get started on this as well. So really, other than that, I think we're hopeful only to be able to get things rolling. So as of next Tuesday, we can draw employment contracts up and start saying, yes, we'll rent to you, and yes, we'll rent to you, and we can get things going. I don't think, group, anything else from? Any questions at all on any of the other?
My question was, at one point, there was discussion about Steamboat Days not paying any, rental fees. I don't know if that was,
It's still in
That's,
there.
that's written into this agreement,
is that in there? I couldn't.
yes. And it matches the slides and the presentation as we've gone, as they've made their presentations from the beginning, even where I missed it. But
It's number
And our
five,
attorney has
C5.
cleared this contract, right?
But it doesn't say anything about waiving any previous steamboat days.
Where does it have it in here, Stephanie? C5?
Two, page two. C5.
Well, any one of you.
Any Stephanie.
Yeah, it says all AMF-produced events, including steamboat
Okay.
days, shall not be charged a rental fee.
Yeah.
I guess that's my only
But
hang up. I mean, there's already, our $250,000, that we would award you yearly, well, split it up and biannually.
Correct.
And then also the one-time upfront of $35,000. And I know we've already recently lowered the expected rental costs for Steamboat Days. I mean, I know I don't know. I just want to get a feel
Sure.
for, I guess, how everyone else feels about it.
Yeah, I'll open it, and then you can wrap it up as a Steamboat Days person, because I'm, again, not a Steamboat
Yes.
Days person, I'm AMF, and they are separate. So on the AMF side of things, you know, we want to drive as many events as we can to those riverfront properties. And without us doing that, I fear for who will do it. You know, it seems like it's maybe now or never on those buildings. So while Steamboat Days and Snowball and some of the legacy events don't have those rentals changed, and there's some benefit to the legacy folks, there's benefit to the city for all those as well. And I think the more we can do, the more revenue we can drive back to the city with that 80-20 split. Do we benefit? Absolutely. Do we support Steamboat Days with our funding? Absolutely. But I think that the benefit for Steamboat Days, I would hope, for the city, is going to be outweighed financially with the dollars that we're able to push through by having events downtown.
That really echoes my sentiment too. Amy Burkhart, 2633 Cliffwood Drive. But the other piece of that is just the way the finances are flowing through. You know, AMF is its own nonprofit organization, but its mission is to support a downtown music festival, which currently is Steamboat Days. And so in this situation, if, you know, Steamboat Days were to be considered a legacy event, 100% of that rental would flow through. But we would quickly come back here and petition, we don't want to be considered a legacy event in our contract, which will be coming up at your next work session, because then 80% of that revenue would stay with AMF. So, you know, it just seems like we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, essentially. So that's kind of where we just decided in this contract to ask if we could shelter both organizations so that it was just very clear and there wasn't a lot of funny, you know, things in the accounting of it. So it's kind of where we're at.
I'm Jeff Burkhart. I have the same address as Amy. Full disclosure. And I would say, Annie, it's a good question. It's a fair question. That I was a treasurer of Steamboat Days back in the past, and the way I understand it, the rent that Steamboat Days paid to the city was to reimburse the city for funds advanced to fix the parking lot, to raise the parking lot, to put the electrical and the power supply underneath the parking lot. And that was paid back at $10,000 a year from Steamboat Days to the city for a set period of time, a finite period of time, to cover the expense, which was done and completed, but then it turned into ongoing rent, the same amount going forward. So that wasn't always charged to Steamboat Days.
Jeff, before you sit down.
Yes, sir.
If you're done.
I'm done for right this moment.
Becky,
I
are
don't
you
know.
still on
Go ahead.
that? You still on?
No, go ahead.
Explain to the people in the audience and to the people that are listening, how the city is going to come out ahead on this, how we're going to make any money on this deal. If we're saying that AMF is not going to charge, we're not charging them any rentals for any hosted or produced event.
Okay.
How is the city going to make any money on this deal?
I think the real question Councilman, will be, how is the city going to lose less?
Okay, that's good.
Just to be fair.
Terminology's fine. Okay,
Right,
that's
right.
good.
And the answer is, we're going to bring in someone who has more expertise and experience in the backing of a very large involved group that's going to push forward at the auditorium, the depot, and the port. And we will have a group that, yes, our mission is to support the music festival, Steamboat Days, but we will go beyond that and use the auditorium the way it should have been being used the whole time. And the way that you will benefit financially is we'll share in revenue as we're more successful at the 80-20 split.
And so, where are we gonna get 20%? From what? If we're not charging you any rental fees, then how are we getting any?
For the events we host.
Ticket sales, sponsorship.
Okay, you hear that, everybody? This is what-
Yeah, that's right.
Well, and I'll just jump in there real quick as far as the promotion piece. So it is kind of, there's two models out there for buildings like this. There's the full building model, and then there's the piecemeal model, if you will. Okay, so in a lot of bigger markets, bigger buildings, there's a flat fee if you want a building. So you're a promoter. I'm promoter ABC, and I want to go have a concert at the Mark of the Quad Cities, which is now the Tax Slayer Center, formerly the iWireless Center, formerly the whatever, which they're making a lot of money off of, I might add, off those sponsorship and building names. But there's a flat fee, and that covers everything. That covers, everything. It's a one fee deal. Then as the promoter, you just hope to sell more tickets, and your cut of the concessions, whatever else you negotiate. So if it costs $20,000 to rent the building, you better hope that you're selling more than $20,000 worth of tickets, and so our building's a little bit different because it's more piecemeal, and the civic music folks could speak more to that. I mean, you've got to pay the rent. It's like $1,300 just to rent the building, but then if you need more sound than the building has, that costs money. If you need more lights, that costs money. If you need more setup, more tear down, things above and beyond, that all costs more money. So it's a little bit different in the piecemeal approach versus just the rental approach. But obviously the goal, people that are out promoting shows are out to make money off selling tickets and then selling concessions inside the building. And hopefully, when you have a successful show and sell enough tickets, whoever is then the promoter is making more money. AMF won't be the only people promoting shows down there. There are, and again, if you look at similar sized venues, Fairfield, Iowa, Peoria, Illinois, Peoria's obviously a little bit bigger and stuff, but I mean, there are promoters looking to do events in buildings our size. And automatically the question is, well, how come VenueWorks didn't put a bunch of stuff in there? Right. And the answer that I've been told is they tried and were just told no, that they just weren't interested because it didn't work in this market. And we could go ad nauseum on that, and I won't. But I guess my point is, it's not just AMF that's going to go out and try to get a sponsorship and bring in a concert or an event. It's going to be promoters from all across the Midwest that are going to come in. They're going to want to make money too. We're just going to be the vehicle to make it happen. And as we do that, the revenue that we have is going to be shared with the city. So it's not a real easy business plan to wrap your mind around, because you got a promoter, you've got somebody who owns the building, and somebody in between.
Exactly.
You guys own the building, we'll be the in between, and then the promoter's going to drive that revenue, and then we'll share it back to you.
So maybe kind of to describe that a little bit more succinctly on the two models is there will be sometimes you are getting a split of the rents. So like in Casey's promoter model, somebody is actually coming in and renting the building and maybe other associated things from us. So then you'll have a split, just straight split of the rent. But if it is an AMF produced event, so something that we seek and bring in on our own, that's when you're in that 80-20 on the profits. So that would be things like ticket sales, sponsorship, concessions, that type of thing. So there, you'll get money two ways on that 80-20, sometimes rent, sometimes profit sharing.
And an example, a hard example to that is they did a Price is Right show. Anybody remembers that? Down there, VenueWorks did this maybe past spring. That was a flat fee show. They came in and they said, we want your building and staff to run, and if Mike O'Neill were here, he could tell you the exact numbers. But we're gonna write you, how much does it cost to have your building for a night and staff it? Because, you know, just the rent is only $1,300. So I'm just spitballing here, and this is completely for example's sake, but say it's $5,000. And then Venue Works and everybody else, that was it. They got a check for $5,000. They didn't have to do anything else. Price is Right came in, did all the promotion, did all the ticketing, did all the other work involved with it. So that's an example of where somebody calls and says, it's a one-stop shop, here's your check. We split the money with you and don't do anything else. As opposed to somebody else that wants to just promote a show and say, how much is the building to cost to rent? Now go out and find sponsors, go out and find vendors to come in and serve food, et cetera, et cetera. So there's two models. Again, I'm Irish, so I use a lot of words. But I think it's either here's the rent, let's share it, or here, I should say, here's the entire building cost, let's share it, or here's the rent, and then as we make money, if we make money on a successful event, let's share that too. It's just two different ways to get to the same end. We'd love it if everybody just came in and wanted to write the full amount check. Big, super popular buildings have that happen, right? Burlington Memorial Auditorium is not there yet. But,
So this is a different contract from what we had with Venue Works in a lot of ways. Venue Works was a contract where, as we provided a subsidy to them, but at the end of the year, we essentially covered whatever their net, if they had a net loss after that, even after that subsidy, we covered that. This contract is written as providing a subsidy, but it's up to AMF to run at a profit. If they don't, I mean, I guess they could come back and ask you for more, but it's not something that's in this contract. They don't have anything that's in here to guarantee them to be made whole at the end of the year.
That's a key difference.
And that looks obvious, and that is obviously a lot better, correct?
I mean,
as far
it's-
as we're not having to cover
From our
any of their losses.
It's better. Now, this all depends on.
Right.
Well, I guess that all depends on what your definition of better is too.
Right, I mean,
At the end of the day, if they were to meet their projections on usage of the facility, this would see a declining subsidy amount required from us. If they don't increase the usage of the facility, you're likely to see the net cost to the city be just a little bit less than what it was before. Not a tremendous amount less, but less.
I think that's fair. And the real benefit, I believe, to you, Councilwoman, would be, you know what your loss is now, and it's fixed. And we have the incentive to go forward, and we're sharing that with you as we do, and we're successful. We're willing to share that with you. We made 2 offers, and this was the most logical one for the council. And we believe that we can duplicate what we've seen in other markets not very far away from here that have taken over from Venue Works after they did not get in and do it very well, and they saw it go really well after that. We believe we can do that.
I think another thing to consider here, because we've talked about if the city took it and did it themselves and comparing it to Venue Works, the plus I see here too is that we have a group that has a lot of energy and passion. They're willing to put forth to make something happen there. And I think that's a big plus.
I think I mentioned with Stephanie, I was up talking about a couple of edit changes, but the bottom line for me is, once we've decided that we're not going to shutter the auditorium and we're not going to operate on our own, this is the only viable option. So that's come forward. So once we made that decision, now it's just a matter of, are we satisfied with these agreements? Right.
This was brought up, as you're mentioning, as a topic, really coming out of last budget session, looking at different alternatives for ways to try to reduce costs. Well, this isn't necessarily going to do anything about reducing costs.
Well, in this next year, perhaps.
And it may reduce a little bit as time goes on, but it's not the type of cost reduction that a shuttering thing would accomplish. That being said, we had a budget that was balanced for this year. I will let you know that next year, you're gonna have some challenges to think about, not just for the given year, but as to think about what are the impacts over 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
But you're not concerned about that, are you?
Oh, yes, I am.
No, you really are.
Hey,
Just wanted to check.
Bob, we put in 5 hard years to get this thing straightened out. I'm not interested in blowing it now.
I know.
It was a tough road, guys. You remember that?
I do remember.
That's what I said to you guys, you know, we're counting on you to make this work. Because we have a fire chief sitting back there who's got 6 guys' jobs counting on it.
In terms of an agreement, I think that from a staff perspective, we've been happy with what we've been able to work out for division of duties, of how this moves forward. I know that we'll still end up with stuff that we have questions about as we do it. But this has been a good partnership to try to coordinate with.
We're working with local people, though, and I think that's a lot different than dealing with venue workers.
Yeah.
And will we be able to get together like on an annual basis, kind of like, I don't know, I believe we had done that with Venue Works and kind of like, how are you doing? What's going on?
They provided a report. I don't remember if that was included in the contract or not, but I know that they provided at least annual updates, and it would make sense that we have that occur as time went on.
I think that
here.
would be, I don't know if that could be included in the contract.
And
or if
there
it
is
just-
also the city representation on the board as well, so either a city council man or woman or a staff member would be on the AMF board, so you'll have that kind of constant feedback
Yeah.
of how things are going also.
Yeah, definitely.
That's all the help we can get.
But for Stephanie's, we could probably add just a language, if it's not included already, just to make sure that it's annual reporting.
It's an H.
Okay.
Is it?
Record keeping, and it doesn't say a meeting, but.
We could change the language on that
Just
to
so-
include an annual report to the council.
Yeah, it is in there if requested by the city, so.
Okay, if requested. we would have to-
Okay. Anything else you guys want to add?
Not I.
Jeff, I appreciate your clarification.
That was good. That was a good clarification. We
Thank you.
needed to hear.
Thank you.
And I'm happy that you both live in the same house. Anything else on this council?
Not for me.
Okay. Good, thank you, everybody. We'll see you Monday. Resolution approving the preliminary plat of the Summer Street Addition subdivision. I think this is in the county, is that correct?
Yeah, this is in the city's 2-mile county review zone. It is a 5-lot subdivision. This went to the Planning Commission October 24th. They voted 5-1 to recommend approval of their preliminary plat as shown. The only concern was just the amount of traffic on Summer Street and added driveways with new lots on that street, which I think is just a concern for existing residents as well. This is the aerial. I guess there is an existing homestead there now, but would split it up into 5 lots. There is some, if you look at the plat, some shared driveways between a couple of the lots, which would reduce so that each individual lot wouldn't have access, but are some shared driveways for lot 1 and 2, and I believe lot 4 and 5. I have to look at that closer. But this is the preliminary plat. The county has approved the preliminary plat and the final plat. Both our normal process is to approve the preliminary plat at one meeting and then follow with the final plat. We have approved at the same meeting one other subdivision in the county 2-mile area at the same meeting with the final plat second on the list. Did just receive late Friday from the developers a request to do that again with this, approve the final plat. Second on the meeting agenda after this, did want to pass that along to council to see if that's something you'd consider.
Can we see that other picture?
So the hashed area is the area that's being subdivided.
Okay, can you give me a perspective on where we are here?
It's might be able
In
to.
relationship, when Mr. Nagraki was here talking about Deer Point, he was. gonna
This is at least probably a mile south of that. This is south of where Madison and
Okay.
Summer come together.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you can just throw it up.
So it'd probably be, down in here, here's Madison, here's Summer, and down here,
Oh,
Nagraki's is
Oh,
up in
it's
here.
way down. Okay.
Yeah, so it's
It's pretty far
down in
south.
here.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions, Council, on that? We okay?
No questions.
Any thought on the final plat as well, or delaying that to the next meeting or this meeting?
What's our normal procedure?
Typically, we've done them at the following meeting. Like I said, we have done it one other time for a 2-mile subdivision where there's no infrastructure, but typically we like to have them separate meetings. The county has approved both the preliminary and final plat already at their meetings.
Do you have any preference, Council?
I think it would be fine.
Okay, we're okay with that?
Yeah.
I guess we're okay with it.
Okay.
All right, resolution awarding contract for the 2017 Vineyard Street Area Drainage Project. Jesse.
Eric has a couple of slides, but I'll start jumping into it. So the background on this, it was originated by petition. The area has some localized flooding during heavy storm events. So funding was allotted in the amount of $313,500 for the project. It involves quite a bit of ditch work, some culvert work, and a few isolated storm structures throughout the Vineyard Street road. Next slide. So here's a summary of the bids that came in. We had K&A Excavating. They were low at $273,794.98. We're recommending award to them. The tentative construction schedule would start next spring and finish up sometime in the summer. Any questions?
I would note that even though you have a preliminary budget of 313,000 and you're at 273, we usually include the engineering
Right.
in there too, so that's on top of that. It's
Mhm.
gonna be pretty close to
It
that
is going to be close to budget.
313 by the
That's
time we get
correct.
that.
All right, thanks.
Since we had approved it already, it's pretty hard to go back and say, no, we're not gonna do it. Okay. Okay, resolution awarding contract for Flint Hills Golf Course Pump House Project.
We did receive bids October 10th. Received 2 bids. One was late, past the deadline, so we're not able to accept that. The bid that we did receive was $119,699 from AC Contracting in Keokuk. We had the city budgeted $120,000 through the capital improvement program for FY18. We have discussed the project with AC Contracting and checked on references, would recommend moving forward with them.
And the timeline for this?
It is to be completed by March 15th of 2018.
Question? Council, anything?
Not for me.
Issues there? Thank you, Eric. Resolution approving the 5-year road plan for the city of Burlington, Iowa.
I'll let Jesse do a lot of the talking here, but this is a 5-year road plan, and you have not seen this updated for 2 years. So it'll be a good refresher and go over some of the stuff that we have. I have some maps. Slideshow first,
I believe it's been 3 years since we've done one of these, so it's been long due. I'll wait till Eric gets slides ready.
And do the slideshow first?
Yeah.
Okay, Annette, do you want to go to the?
I did gather a little bit of information on where our road system is and just some general kind of idea so you guys know. Condition summary, every other year the DOT drives all the roads in Iowa and logs things like cracks and faults and alligator cracking and things of that nature to develop a PCI rating. Basically, if you take every 20%, you can separate it into 5 different categories. This is how the distribution of our roads in Burlington lay out. You can see, you know, a lot of times the different pavement manuals will recommend that you have a bell curve, and that's the most effective way to manage your roads. And we're close. We're not quite uniformly distributed, but we're in the ballpark. So next slide. The total amount of roads we have in Burlington, we have 156 miles of road. 97 are HMA asphalt roads. We have 52 miles of concrete and then another 6 of seal coat. So that's just kind of the breakdown in case you guys were wondering. And then the CIP plan budget that we have set out for the next 5 years, starting in 2019 fiscal year, you can see there. So it's 1.4 going up to 1.5 in 2021. So next. This is kind of a tough slide to read, but I wanted to get all of the different road names on one slide so you all could see it. The map is probably going to be the best way to really show people what's going on, and I did provide a PDF for that as well, or the overhead would work. So this coming year, 2018, is going to be a fairly busy year for us out on the roads. We have 2 more years of the seal coat program running, and those are not referenced in that list that you saw on the last slide because we've already kind of covered those and didn't really want to draw those to too much attention. But the other 2 things that are coming over from previous budget, well, 4 things, I guess, from previous budget years are the Mount Pleasant Street overlay from Highway 61 back to Gear Avenue, and then the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge project over Osborne Street. Those are 2 pretty big items from previous years that will be happening this year. And then we will still have a little bit of construction left over from Agency West. We'll be doing the intersection of Plaza West Drive and the intersection of West Burlington Avenue starting next spring. Along with that, we'll be kicking off the construction of the upgrades to Agency East, which you can see just on the east side of Highway 61, out to Melrose Court, I believe it is. So I'm not going to get into every single road, but you can see that there's quite a bit of seal coat work to be done. Those are the ones that aren't on the list, but the major road construction projects for next year will be at Aspen and Dill, where we have approximately 30 to 40-year-old concrete that it just is inundated with patches. It's the only section of that road in that area that hasn't been replaced yet since it's been built back in the 70s, I believe. And then Flint Hills Drive, which will be going to an HMA overlay next year. So those are the major ones that are worth pointing out, but we'll be using this as a guide document for road replacement going forward. One of the roads that maybe could be bumped up, but we're trying to apply for STBG grants, just funding assistance, is the longer one there, Madison and 9th. So from Harrison all the way up to Division, I believe. Yeah. So we have some some longer stretches of road on here in the 5 years, so it's,
Yeah, Central Avenue would be a good one too.
yeah, it's rough on Central. So. Any questions or comments on how we're approaching this the next 5 years?
We don't have anything. You have anything? Okay.
No.
All right,
Glad we're doing this.
Yeah.
thanks.
A lot of bad streets.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Jesse, are you putting that out on the website too, or
Yeah, we will be. I just wanted to get it in front of council. and
where
get
would
the-
people find that?
That would be on the www.burlingtoniowa.org. There will be a drop down there for the different departments, and click on the engineering department and there'll be a link to it, or it may even be displayed on the front part of the engineering department for probably a little while here. But we need to get it out on there. It's not out on there yet.
Yep, and Nick mentioned he'd try to have a link on the front page, at least for the,
Yeah, when it first comes
once we
out.
put it out, it'll be there for the first few weeks.
Yeah, all right.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Would point out that we are limited as to what we can get done. I mean, this,
I just finish up a couple of things.
Okay.
How we arrived and selected the roads that we chose to be part of the 5-year road plan. PCI data, PCI, which is the pavement condition data, and Jesse talked a little bit about that. We took that in correlation with roads that have higher ADT or average daily traffic load on them to try and get them replaced. Put them a little bit more, preference them a little bit more than some of the lower residential roads. As you also noticed, he talked a little bit about seal coat. We have a lot of MASL sewer separation to do over the next several years. A lot of those roads will be hit during that separation process. So those roads aren't forgotten about. They're just not part of this plan. They're not being paid out of the same funds. And there'll be a lot more going into that planning effort than just for the 5-year road plan. So
So in other words, you're coordinating, so we're not.
overlapping. So we don't fix a road and then tear it up at the year after.
Exactly. There you go.
It's really smart.
and our main funding there is listed about $1.5 million a year. That's what we're able to put into a bond schedule and stay at about our existing tax levy and not backload debt, keep it to where we're getting into a spot where we have stair-step debt. One of the things that we're trying to provide room for as time goes on, we had a bump in our debt load that back in 2012, it was pretty much level debt payments through 2022 or 2023. So we've been working through trying to get a little bit better stair-stepped, and we brought on debt since that time that allows a stair-step to be built, but we don't get through that until we get to that 2023 timeframe. We'll have a little bit more flexibility about what kind of discussions we have at that point, whether for the council that's sitting in these chairs at that point can have a discussion about, do you look at lowering the level of tax askings that we put towards debt service? We've done comparisons in the past, and as we get into budget season, we'll look at them again, where our property tax askings is and how much goes towards debt service. Part of the reason that we have a higher property tax asking than other communities is the amount that we put towards debt service payments. Ideally, we'll be in a position to reduce that debt service asking as we reach that 2022 timeframe. I know there's also the desire from the council, at least some members, to have a look at how do we be in a position to at least consider getting Cascade Bridge done.
Cascade Bridge.
And this type of a debt structure, that $1.5 million a year, still keeps us in line to at least consider that in about the 2024 timeframe. Again, it'll be kind of contingent on who's sitting up here at council and what priorities are. We're just limited as how much we can afford with debt service for work to do.
Okay. Next item, resolution of the City Council of Burlington, Iowa, affirming its support for the federal historic tax credit program.
This was brought forward from, really as something to pay attention to from Downtown Partners, and maybe Steve, if you want to kind of address what's going on.
Yeah, very briefly, as federal government and Congress look at revamping federal tax code, the existing federal historic tax credit was not listed in the programs that they are considering keeping. Downtown Partners believes this is a hugely important tool for redevelopment, especially in our downtown, but really for historic buildings and properties across the country. Locally, we have had a number of pretty major redevelopment projects that I don't believe would have happened without the federal historic tax credit. And going forward, I think we're going to see some other projects possibly jeopardized if this tax credit tool is taken away. Be happy to answer questions as best as I can. I am not a tax credit expert. It equals about 20% of a project cost, which is substantial.
We have one sitting here.
You do.
Question, it says we urge Congressman Rod Blum, Senator Chuck Grassley, and Senator Joni Ertz. Why are we picking out those three people?
I believe Blum is on the committee that is sort of spearheading this.
Tax credit.
And I believe Congressman Lobsheck has already stated his support of the historic tax credit.
Thanks for that clarification.
And I do think, you know, like my projects that were littler, I didn't get money back, I got tax credits, I use it. But the bigger projects, that's where it's really important. And we've got some big buildings that need to be developed, and the developers would use those tax credits. And for an individual, I think, you know, the smaller projects, it's okay to have, and you save money on your taxes over years and years, but those bigger buildings, it's gonna be real important.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the list I saw of projects that have used this in downtown include Bent River. The Tama project is currently using federal tax credits. I know the Methodist Church loft building from former Sturmers. I think there's several
401
others.
Jefferson.
Okay, 401 Jefferson.
I did not use it at 515, 517.
Okay, and I think 400 and 404 Jefferson does, well, some
Yes,
apartments
yeah.
as well, so. And again, we have some big projects in the pipeline. These tax credits could be crucial. They can make the difference whether or not those projects move forward.
I think it was a big help with the First United Methodist Church when they finally got that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the bigger the building, the more they need it. It adds up to a lot of more money, and you would syndicate and get money, but.
Yeah, we obviously have plenty of buildings that still need it. I mean, just in our town, but everywhere.
Exactly, yeah, it's not just a downtown
It's
thing.
not
It's
just us.
countrywide.
I
Yeah.
think for a state, we're really lucky for the state historic tax credits, because they're 25%, they come back as cash. That's a real big helping, you know, real big.
And to be honest, I worry about what's
I
gonna
know,
happen there
yeah.
with
That
state
would
funding.
kill our downtown development. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's really, really important. You know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Consent agenda, resolution of nuisance abatements, we okay? Refunding the beer license for Casey's, I assume that's the old one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the
Okay, resolution acceptance, the final payment for Seal Coat Streets.
Yeah, this resolution will close out the 2017 Seal Coat project. W.L. Miller was the contractor on that. We have a final payment of $28,842.70. This brings there's some quantity adjustments of 41,000 negative, so it was bid out at 356. So the final price is at 323,718.48 cents, and then you'll have engineering on top of that. And this was paid out of road use tax.
Okay. Everybody's happy, I assume, so.
I would say Jesse and I are not overly pleased with the work that was done, but it's satisfactory.
That's the conditional.
Okay, that's interesting.
All right. Okay, thank you. Final acceptance, retention monies for the Flint River Trail, Phase 1 South.
We've completed, or substantially completed Phase 1 South, did a walkthrough last week with Jesse and Charlie and I and the contractor and engineers. Did have one small change order to it. One note in the council item did state local option sales tax under funding sources of $80,335 for the project. We did have some local fundraising, so $13,685 will be used for that to reduce the local option sales tax to what was budgeted there. And we still have some remaining for future work. We are still working with the state and our engineer on additional project to utilize our remaining grant funds moving forward further north on Bluff Road. But for this project, do have the funding covering this project with the excess grants, and hopefully can complete some more of it.
Okay. Okay. Resolution approving purchase of 8 used flatbed trailers for flood wall mitigation project.
This resolution will approve purchasing 8 used flatbed trailers. As you'll remember in the budget cycle, we talked about operation of the flood wall and how we're going to store the equipment. In the budget, I had 6 trailers budgeted at $20,000 a piece. Through some research, which I think some of the information in there for comparables, which is kind of hard to do with used equipment, is in there. The 98 trailers, or the 98-year trailers, will go for $9,500 a piece, and then the 99 trailers at $10,005. Why the expanded of the trailers? They had 8 on hand. 6 was an estimate in the budget cycle, and we will have more flood wall. So we will have plenty of use for the 8 trailers that we're purchasing. And I have a picture of kind of what the things that will go on these trailers, if you want to see it.
Sure.
Where will these be stored with all this?
Most of them we're hoping we can fit at the Armory site, but we also had some money in the budget to do necessary improvements to, I don't know if it has a name, but there's a blue building south of the southern parking lot that is city-owned. It's planned to be demoed,
Yeah.
but until we have our own building built, it'd be a place that we could house them.
Be close by.
Because as you can see here, so what's going to be on these trailers is going to be the planks, which this is from the Davenport demo day that we went to. So they have little 6-foot sections of plank, but we'll have 20-foot sections, and then we'll have pillars that stand about, I think, 6 foot tall. Leo can correct me if I'm wrong, but so we're going to have 1,400 foot of this type of material to take care of. And so we still have some money left in the budget to be able to purchase more used trailers like this.
Hopefully, we don't have to use these very often.
I would prefer that. But
That's
we'll have them if they're necessary.
wishful thinking.
Well, come on.
But I hope the day we do have to use them, we say, we're sure glad we did that.
Told us.
You're right. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good. Okay, we have a contract for services with Geode Forestry for timber, listing and timber sale on Otter Island.
This is same contract as previously, I guess, approved a number of years, or was it 7 or 8 years ago? Again, the couple of the items within it, listing agent will receive 8% of the sales as for payment of the services, 4% due upon signing contracts and down payment by the approved timber buyer, and 4% upon final inspection of the harvest. So it depends on the bid that we receive back as to what the total amount would be for the listing agent. This is with Geode forestry by Petrozelka. I was very familiar with the island and has done a lot of work out there in the past.
Okay, good on that? Yep. Resolution approving engineering services, I think Mr. Leo is up, between City of Burlington and Beanstra and Kim from Moline, professional engineering for phase 6 of the flood mitigation project. And while he's up there, I think he's gonna give us an update on the current flood wall.
Yes.
Yes.
Leo Foley.
It's Leo Foley with Beanster and Kim. It's about time, I guess, to give you a status report. Project's about 40%, phase 5 is about 40%, which is first phase, about 40% complete. All the underground work is moving along very well. I've got some pictures to show you some of the bumps in the road, along with where we're at.
So this is an update before we talk about the new contract.
Yes. Maybe. Okay, the first slide's table of contents. I'll just go through the phase 5 status, show you the excavation unknowns, things we found, things like that. Sheet pile, H piles, the water issues that are a big concern. Just wanted you to see some of the rebar that's being done now, a summary of the change orders that have taken place or that are in the process of taking place. Then we'll talk about the phase 6 and the budget and the schedule for that. And finally, all the phases with the estimate and the schedule. Okay, so this one is some of the excavation unknowns. As we were excavating, and I think everybody that goes by there sees there's a lot of excavation. The bottom picture shows all of those are those steel tiebacks for your existing wall. And we had to excavate those, and we didn't want to cut them. So it was very delicate excavation to make sure, and we think they did a really good job of doing that. However, when they were doing that, there were a lot of things under that ground that we didn't know about, they didn't know about. Some of that is just typical big rocks. Others were actually concrete slabs. And if you go to the next one, for instance, again, that middle picture shows sheet pile coming out sideways underneath the ground, probably from something early on. Then there was an H pile that was down there, and our wall was supposed to go right through there. So they had to cut that all out and take that out. There's also, and my eyes aren't very good at looking over there. The picture on the far left shows a big piece of concrete, and that concrete goes down 20, 30 feet and is very large. And it's under the ground maybe 6 feet. The only thing we can think of is when the old towboats came, because we'd looked at some of the historical pictures, that they used to use these pieces of concrete to tie up to. Because there was 2 or 3 of them, and we're not removing the whole thing. What we had to do is just cut it back. So if you can see the excavator up there, we had to cut it back to about that level. But that's quite a bit of removal, and those were some of the problems there. And the next picture's just, and they're not great pictures in this one. It looks a lot better on my computer screen. But we were just showing the areas. The top left picture shows an area where, again, there was like a concrete shelf underneath the ground. We believe that shelf was put in. It's not attached to the river wall. So we believe somebody put that under there, and we didn't have plans for it, that to hold up the kind of the walkway or the area that they must have had settlement, and they went in and they did a patch and put it back. Probably done before the 80s, because I saw pictures of 80s when they really did that, but that was probably in there prior to that. Again, that had to be removed. So that was part of the excavations and all the problems. Next one shows a sheet pile. Wherever you didn't have sheet pile, I think I told this group one time that we didn't use the sheet pile for structural because we weren't confident that we could get away with using it for structural. But we did try to use it to help mitigate how much water would come through there. So this is the new sheet pile going in, and at the upstream side and the downstream side, we put in new sheet pile. That all drove in very well. Everything went quite well with that, and it's 100% complete. Next thing is H piles. H piles, I think I told you, we were going to be putting those every 7 feet and 2 rows of them. and it turned out to be 18,000 linear feet of H-pile. We were gonna go 50 feet deep with them. That crane you're seeing, or that it's driving the sheet pile in, you can start to see there, our foundation sits on top of that sheet pile, and it goes down 50 feet. Go to the next page. So again, these are just some typical ones, showing some of the sheet pile sticking out of the ground as they're driving it in. And we did run into problems with this sheet pile. And we had Terracon assist us early on, and we did borings. All these are our 22 borings we did ahead of the project. When we do borings, they go down and they say, okay, here's a 50-foot boring. At the bottom of that boring, you'll have an allowable pressure, an allowable loading that you can put on top of that. And they told us what it is. And then our structural engineers designed the foundations to sit on top of that. And they did that design, and it's a huge foundation that you can see in there. That keeps that wall from moving when you have that 500-year flood that's sitting at the top of that wall. When we started driving them, the first third of the project, which is complete, they drove down to 50 feet, and when you do that, the way they measure it is they take a hammer on the driver, and they knock it down on top of the pile, and they measure how far that pile moves with the weight of that hammer. And if it moves more than, for instance, 6 inches, then they know they didn't get the pressure, and you keep driving and keep driving. Well, on about the mid-level, right behind the auditorium, they started not getting the pressure that we wanted. So now everybody's nervous. What do you do? If you keep going, then your flood wall foundation it's in question. And there's just no way we're going to do that. It just can't happen. This does happen. It's happened on bridges before. Why does it happen? You take 22 borings, and you're hoping that the sands are the same in all 22 places. What we're finding out about yours is it's different every 7 feet. So some places we got it, some places we had to add on. If you have to add on, you have to go down to 50 or 60 or 75 feet. And when you add on, of course, it's an additional cost. If we'd have known ahead of time, would it have been cheaper for you? Yes. Not significantly, because you can't go to 75-foot piles anyway. They only deliver them at 50, maybe up to 60 feet. But then they're going to add on. The way we did this with the DOT is we said the DOT method that they get an extra 10 feet. So if they have to add on, they get paid for 10 feet a pile, and it's something like $31 a foot. So we had, from the middle of the project on, we've had to start adding on. We're not done doing it at this point.
So, do they weld these pieces together?
They weld them together, and because we told them we wanted them to do it as certified by the DOT, it has to be a certified welder.
And does that not weaken the potential?
Actually makes it stronger.
It does, okay.
Yes. And they continue driving. So they weld it on, and then they continue driving it down on the ground. We've been, and when you do that, I told you how they do this. There's 2 or 3 different equations and ways you can figure out whether you're getting that bearable pressure. We called Terracon back in because my structurals were saying we weren't getting it from about the mid to the north part. So Terracon had another way to do it. So we did a bunch of testing where we drove the pile up. We let the pile sit for 3 days. There were some thoughts that if you're in clays, the clays start to stick after 3 days, and you can get that allowable pressure after 3 days. We tried that. We pretty much sure yours are, because of the sand and the rock, the gravel that yours are in, there is no bedrock where we're at, that we're having to drive them. Most of them are about 7 feet. We have to drive about 7 more feet. So that's a cost estimate, and I'll get to where we're at on that. So that's one problem we had. On the other hand, we're well over halfway done with all that now, and things are moving along. Next thing is water issues. We've run into quite a bit of water issues, which we kind of knew, but we didn't know exactly why. The port building. Everybody knows the port building has water that comes underneath it. We thought if we drive sheet pile, attach it to your sheet pile that's already there, that might cut that water off. Then we put our foundation in, and we move on down the thing. As we started doing it, these steel rods water is running right along those steel rods and pretty active. The pictures don't always show it great. Go to one more slide. Will that video go if you hit it? No?
No, but you can definitely tell that's moving water.
Okay. The video is very good, and I will get you the video so you can see it at some time. I'll make sure Charlie and them hit it. I did not test that when I set it down, and I thought about that. But anyway, there's definitely moving water in quite a bit. So what we said is we're going to shut that water off, and we're going to put clay in behind it. And that was our intent along, was to put some clay in. But we estimated so many cubic yards, and we're quite a bit over on what we needed for clay. A lot of the material we're taking out of here has a lot of rock and stuff in it, and we just didn't want to reuse it. We only wanted to reuse the material that we thought was solid material that could be compacted in. Again, on the end of our foundation, they're worried about that foundation turning. So they want clay, good clay, on the back side of it too. We had that clay in our estimate, so we had numbers in there. So these numbers I'm telling you about aren't really change orders as much as their quantity adjustments in the upside. So I thought it's a good time for everybody to see that. Okay, next one is rebar. As you can see, this is, I think somebody asked me today, is this thing gonna hold water back? As you can see from the amount of rebar you're putting in there, this flood protection project is here forever. It has really got a lot of design in it, and so all that rebar has concrete underneath it, attached to concrete below, with two H-piles, 50 to 75 feet in the ground below it, all the way along there. And we're moving right along, so things are going quite well in that part of the project. Okay, the part you don't want to hear is a change order summary. So there's been, as you can see there, 15 change orders submitted. Some of them you'll see we've got denied by, because we didn't, the first one, that top one is $169,000. That was the big one. That's the big one that has to do with the additional H-piles. And that was an estimate. So what we told them to do is to keep going. We didn't want to stop them, but we wanted to come to you and make sure everybody knew what was going to go on. We have talked to Terracon, we've talked to the drivers, pile drivers, to try to figure out if there's other ways around this. Could we put in more thicker piles instead of going deeper? But the cost became, there's no way around it. So we ended up doing 308 piles, additional piles. That's about half the amount of piles we have in there, and adding an average of 7 feet on. And that's how we got to that 169,000. Some of the numbers, I think if you look down there, like the one that is numbers 14 maybe, and we got a D beside it for denied. That's because what they were doing is, because I didn't approve the first pile, the first change order, I certainly don't want to approve that. I went to the city staff and I told them I'd like to come to you and make sure everybody was good with it. But they were submitting me change orders saying, here's where we're at today. You know, if you don't do something, we're in trouble here. So that's why that first change order, when it gets approved, and I got a VA, mean verbally approved, we told them don't stop. We want you to keep going. But they really haven't started getting into that $169,000 yet. They're about to, probably right away. So if you add all of those up on that column that says actual SG amount, it's $322,000, which is about 5% of the project. These projects typically, you estimate 15%, then you get to construct, to design, and we usually lower our percentage of contingency to about 10%. We love to stay below 5%. Like, this one's not going to stay below 5%, as you can see. However, you're completely out of the ground now. I think all of our excavations, we think you're going to be well within that 10%. 10%. So as bad as it looks, you're not out of the water on the project. You're not in terrible, you know, we're going to be within the 10% contingencies. So you go to the next one. Okay, so the next one, when we first bid this project, the first phase, we thought that was gonna come in around somewhere around 5 million. It came in over 6 million. So Jim has told me, I want to stick with it at $26.2 million, because that's what the amount of money we have. So then the next phase, what can we start doing? So one thing we did is on this phase 6, we started changing a little bit. We said, let's do the pump stations first, and that was one of my ideas, because I think we have some big potential savings on pump stations. And this is a reflection that shows some of the savings that we're gonna have on the 2 pump stations. And if you go to the next picture, this is a pump station that V&K has done that shows a Crisafulli type pumps. This one's a little bit littler, but not a lot, that we'd be using. Similar pumps, we could put some kind of a, you can leave them outside, but you can put like some kind of an enclosure around them and a panel inside of it. You can make the enclosure look good. But this is the kind of pump station that we're looking at to try to save some money. And we've talked to vendors. We've got 2 vendors that have already come into my office. Once we hopefully go forward with phase 6, we'll take your staff out and we'll go look at some of these in operation. Similar size ones too, and that we could look at. All right, so now look at all of the phases together. So I've got the number, and the right side includes engineering. So that 7.4 million, that includes 10% contingencies, not the 5 that you're already at. And that's what that number does. Then we go down to phase 6, and we had it at 5.6. We switched it around a little bit. We calling it 6R at 5.4 million. Then we go down to 7, and we have the tieback walls on Market Street. And then we go to 9, which shows the wastewater treatment plant, the railroad, yard closures, and a depot. I put a question mark beside that, because if you look at that, we had 8.3 million in this from the original documents we did. And now I've got it down to 6 million. But the 8.3 had a lot of the interest in it. So when I looked at our numbers, the 6 million still looks pretty close to the amount of engineering money or construction cost we need. So now it comes down to $22.3 million. That does not include the interest. And I think Jim has had some of his bonding people look at it, and I think the intent was if we could stay to the 22.3 with the interest and everything else, we'd stay within that $26.2 million. So we think in general we're on the right path and things are moving in the right way. We feel like the underground work we knew was going to be challenging. We knew we had a tremendously heavy-duty design. I didn't realize quite, I've personally never been in a position where the pilots weren't deep enough. I've heard that on a lot of big bridges, it happens quite often, but I haven't seen it happen on a flood control project, but there's really not a lot we can do. So if you can just go back now to the phase 6. So back to phase 6. We'd like to get started on phase 6 on those pump stations. We'd like to go visit a few and start doing the design, and that's what that contract is for you today. And now if you could move forward to the schedule. This is the original schedule that was done for the grant. And in my opinion, we're right on schedule. I believe Nick asked the contractor, are you going to have this thing done for Burlington Steamboat Days next year? And the contractor says, I've been forced to do a lot of things I didn't want to do, but I'm doing everything I can. And I think his words were he's on schedule, but he doesn't have any slack in his schedule any longer. So he's still claiming he can make it. So I believe he can. I think things have gone very well the last couple of weeks, especially things have gone well for him.
How does weather play into this?
He knew all along he's got to work during the winter time. Concrete work is work you can do in the winter. And as you can see, he's out of the ground. All that steel,
Right.
he can pour concrete. He has to keep it at certain temperatures, and we're very critical on how he has to do it.
What about spring flood?
Spring flood would be a problem. Spring flood would be a definite problem, especially if it got over the wall. Now, you'll find this funny, but I believe The high water we got just recently helped us a lot. We had that wall excavated almost down to the bottom, and boy, it showed us where water was coming through that wall. As the river came up, that water started pouring through in places, and it helped us out a little bit. We'd like it to stay low all winter. They still have to, there's a storm sewer and a seepage sewer. They're separate sewers. The seepage sewers, if any water comes underneath, the seepage sewer collects it and brings it to a pump station. Storm sewers, all of your storm sewers that used to go across that wall, we did find some of those that you didn't know about either. Those go into a storm sewer and go to the same pump station. But all that work is going to be done now. They're doing that. They can do that in the wintertime also. They have cut into the Market Street box. That connection's done. The connection to the Valley Street box, which we would like them to do very shortly, is supposed to be done Thursday. They were supposed to do it a couple of weeks ago, but when the river came up, we didn't want them to do it, so they held off. But it's time for them to get, that's the next big one that you want done before winter time.
Thank you.
And any with that, I can answer any questions.
We're learning more than.
Good presentation.
The cost, the way this project's being done is the phases are much more front-loaded than they were before. That means there's more carrying costs for the debt on it. That's reduced the amount of bonding ability. I think that our actual construction costs were in the 22.6 range if I added up the phases before, and now it's down to 22.3. But, that's still, as we move forward, it's going to be subject to what our actual bonding amount is as we get to the next couple of phases on what we're going to actually have for the final phase for ability to do work. And some of that the state gives us 22.6 million. If things come in over budget, we'll have to go to them with if we're making alterations to reduce the scope of the project, we're going to need their approval. And my assumption is, as long as we're not violating what we need to get done to provide coverage, if we need to make some of those adjustments, whether it's complete streets or whatever the case may be, that we can make that happen.
I believe so. The other thing is, if we found some monies but aren't not helpful in the primary flood control part of the project. You don't necessarily want to have it happen, but if something happens and you got a big flood in the state of Iowa and they made a declaration of a emergency, then that's how 2008. That's the last time that happened, and we funded a lot of wastewater treatment plants with standard flood mitigation, not this type of money, but a grant type money. And I know that yours, because now that we have the plan in place, if money becomes available, it will move to the top of the stack. That's one of the last phases, but kind of keeping our fingers crossed we can get money for that.
Just a reminder, a lot of what he showed up there with the 300,000 of additional costs, those aren't efficient. Even if you present that in the form of a change order, the majority of that is quantity adjustments. It doesn't meet the technical terms of meeting a change order.
That's right. It will not show up as a firm change order because we're not changing there was a line item for it in there.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilman? Okay, resolution approving purchasing policies.
So this is just an update of our existing policies. The last time it was updated was in 2015. So since then, the state of Iowa has changed their thresholds on bidding requirements. So basically, I've updated those to reflect the state changes. And those are on page 6, where we talk about informal and formal bidding. It used to be anything over 40,000, we had to use competitive bidding. They raised that to 47,000. And then it was 100,000, now it's 135. So basically just the costs have gone up that require the bidding process. So other than that, it's the same. Any questions?
9 pages to have
I know.
a policy. Anyway, thank
Okay.
you for your work, Steph. Okay, resolution approving contract for real estate services for Terrace, marketing, and selling the Burlington Police Department facility located at 424 North 3rd.
The contract that's in here, I think, I didn't even look at it, so I wouldn't be able to tell you the terms. I think that's a 6-month listing. It's either 6 month or a year, and so I hate not being able to say which one without having looked at it. It is at a 6% commission. What'd you say?
1 year.
1 year. It is at a 6% commission. We've had some of the Manor site was a 5% commission. Some of the other smaller projects, and he kind of explained where their standards typically change. It's at the $1 million threshold. Projects lower than that, their standard commission is a 6%, which is what's in this contract. We've used Terrace on several different projects and had pretty good success. And he's also, at the same time, done some other projects where he's done work for us pro bono, and at times not been really happy with the outcome because of the amount of work that he's ended up taking on as a result. He does recommend listing this property at $100,000. I think it's listed on GIS in the $50,000 range for value as just as a market. But you know, you got these empty, or you have facilities such as this. This is one that needs a significant amount of work. I know he's going to want to get a copy from the police department of the Klingner report, so we can remember to get that to Jesse Caston as he starts to market it, so he can provide some of those preliminary cost estimates that were done on and needs for the facility for a prospective buyer. That being said, we're recommending moving forward with this. There's at least some tentative interest from one party on this structure. We'll see how that does proceed, though. We're not scheduled to be out of that facility probably till July-ish.
Yeah, probably the transition period. I mean, I'm really thinking that Steamboat Days week is really going to be critical. If we can get in before, we're going to have to wait after that. So that could be possible. I mean, with the HVAC update, that's probably about a 2.5 week delay. But I mean, other than that, the project's really on schedule. And I'd encourage you, maybe we can do this individually somehow, but to get you down there sometime. It's just amazing. I mean, almost all the metal stud work's done. The plumbing rough end's pretty much done. The electrical rough end's pretty much done. And so, yeah, I mean, the project's moving right along. But the transition to get into the building, I'm thinking you're probably pretty close.
Okay, and that's kind of what we did a ballpark with Jesse as we talked about what he could market. Yes, he's been through the facility.
Better be careful. Any offers?
So that being all said, that isn't necessarily what we would get for an offer, but at least he's thought of that as being a good starting point
It
for.
doesn't prohibit us from
Tearing it down.
I won't say the rest of it.
So, if we do get something that we, on the backside of this, for an offer, we'll get that presented, but this gives us time to start getting it out there with if there is an interest.
Okay, thank you. The next two items are similar. Agreement with Alliant for street lighting, one on Valley Street and one on Melrose Court. We'll deal with those two together. Nick, is that okay?
The first one, first streetlight request is on Valley Street at approximately, in the application, it's got as you see in the map, there's a blue circle with a white in the center. That's the north pole that's indicated in the application. There are streetlights on the south side of Valley there. We're using existing infrastructure, like I indicated at the last meeting, that will be our preference to try and save costs for new installation of a pole and running of new wire. So that's for the Valley Street one, and then we have another one from Melrose Court. background's tougher to see, isn't it? That's really bad. As you can see at 106, there's an existing pole. And then there's an orange dot just south of that at between 108 and 110. That we use the same existing infrastructure as we did before, so.
Police department requested, or?
These are property owner requests.
Yeah.
We actually had a third one that came in. Unfortunately, there's no infrastructure in the area, and we told them what our staff perspective would be, and then they pulled it. So I don't know if you'll see that one come in the following council meetings, but cost for this on a monthly basis is $9.94.
And so, in that situation you just mentioned,
They requested that the resolution come off the agenda.
would you expect them to cover the cost of the pole? Is that the idea, or the connection?
I wasn't here for the conversation, but I know that we simply told them that we would prefer to use existing infrastructure, and that wasn't satisfactory to them, so they asked it to be removed.
All right.
Can people get a light and pay for it themselves?
Correct.
Okay.
If they contact Alliant will install a street light, a version of a street light on like a garage or a house.
Like a dusted on.
Correct. And they'll install it, and you don't pay anything for the installation costs. You pay $12 and some odd cents a month.
Well, and I've put one somewhere, but I thought I saw some things on Facebook about this area, you know, how dark it is. And I wondered if people could order more lights themselves and pay for them. But I don't know if the poles are there or not, I guess.
I don't know what wattage they are, so I don't know if they're the same strength. These are 80-watt equivalents,
Yeah.
the LEDs. They would have to run power to wherever they're pulling it. I don't know if they would pull it off the property owner's power or not.
Well, I had one, I think you get assessed to your bill, but I don't think it necessarily pulls off, because it's a set amount per month, so.
Yeah, we used to have one in our alley too. The neighbors kind of got together, we all contributed.
For something like these requests, is it something you want to see images on? Or I think the easiest way to understand whether or not there's enough light in that area is to simply drive it. But I don't know how else to try and get you that information.
No, it's okay. I'm okay.
I think that would be the best too, just to drive.
I'm okay.
Yeah, and I also feel like if someone's requesting it, I don't imagine that there's, that they're in the wrong to request
Right,
it.
yeah.
Whether it's feasible or not, that's a whole other question, but.
I guess
Yeah.
my feeling is that enough? I guess that's
Yeah.
what my question is that enough in that area? I don't know, maybe the chief, what do you feel? Is that area pretty dark there in that
Yeah, it is.
neighborhood?
And the comment I wanted to make, that we take these requests really seriously. I actually assign a shift commander that works the night shift to go out there and not only look at the light in the area, but what issues are we having in the area. I mean, lighting is a big deal to crime prevention. It's $9 a month. I don't take that lightly because it'll add up. So I want you to know that we take a real hard look at this and evaluate each one of these requests, and then make recommendations to the street department. At the same time, we encourage people to put lights front and back of their house, front and back of their garage. That's all we can do is make that request, but we have a lot of success with that. We put a couple lights, if you remember, last year up around Maple 10th, Angular and 10th. And since then, even with just the addition of that lighting and then updating the LED lighting, it's made a tremendous difference in how people feel after it gets dark.
I agree.
Coming and going from their homes. So just to let you know, we take these requests very
This is social media, but that in that area, they said there's a lot of petty theft and stuff going on at night because it's so dark there.
Yeah, it is, and it does make a difference.
And-
Like I said, it's expensive. $9 doesn't sound like much, but at the same time, it adds up. But I also understand the importance of lighting as well. So, I mean, it's like when we make some effort to put some lighting in the area, residents start to make an effort
Yeah.
to do the same. So, I think we just keep evaluating that as we go. And I mean, I'm confident we'll have more requests in the future. But with that said, we look at those individually and don't get caught in the trap of, well, we did it here, so we have to do it there. We don't do it. We have criteria that we use,
guess I was bringing it up about people being able to pay, I mean, it is, you know, $10 or $12 a month, but boy, you know, it gives a lot of peace of mind, and I just want to put it out there that they could do that if they wanted to,
Yeah,
and pay
yep.
for it themselves.
And we do the same thing when we're evaluating the area, and we've had some success with it. Like I said, especially if we get the step to kind of step up to the plate first, so.
Have you guys ever, I mean, without having a request come forward from a resident, have any of your officers ever felt like they have a recommendation? I mean, has that ever come forward to us?
Well, I'll tell you what we do, and mostly our recommendations, and we have a lot of success with this, thanks to Alliant, who really contacted us first to get the program started, but that's reporting street lights that are out. You wouldn't believe all the lights that are out around town, so we started doing that on the night shift, reporting back to Alliant, and they've been great about getting them replaced. And so we'll see what difference that makes first.
Sure.
Get all the burnt ones put back in place, and really, like I said, it's an initiative that they took, and we partnered with them, and we're doing that right now as we speak.
good.
So,
Very good.
yeah.
Thank you, Chief.
I can just tell you, we process a ton of phone calls for lights that are out, just because it's, I mean, ultimately we pay for them, but they're their infrastructure. And we simply just go on, and if you're listening, Alliant.com, and then they have a section where it says reported out. You can go in there, but usually when we get the phone calls, we just process them because it's easier than directing them back to a website when we're already capable of doing it. So,
Okay, good. Thank you.
is there any other information when these requests come in that you want to see from us?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I don't need anything more.
Thank you.
All right.
One more, resolution approving amendment access agreement with Maxine Needs for LLC, granting access to subject premises for the purpose of locating a remediation station, conducting environmental investigation or remediation work.
I think that is south of Walgreens on Central.
Yes.
And we've had this agreement in place since 2012. It's $500 a month, and they need to extend it for additional testing through next June. We've done a couple of extensions off of this over the past couple of years.
Okay. No issues. Setting a date for public hearing on November 20th for consideration of ordinance vacating and selling a portion of College Street located between Valley and Market. Consideration of ordinance amending Chapter 126 taxi cab and vehicles for hire. Chapter 127. And consideration of West Avenue Mason Road urban renewal area and plan. Okay, treasury report. Mrs. Crowder. Some more good news coming from our treasurer.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so once again, you have two treasurer's reports in your packet. So our auditors were here this past week.
Oh, really?
Yes. While they were here, they made no changes. They didn't find anything that we needed to change. They are still in their reviewing process, but, so nothing has changed since you've gotten this last time. Our cash is good. We're about 14%. General fund. Around 14, it might be a smidge under, but it's, so that's June's. And then September's is also in your packet. And the only thing that I really say is that we got property tax this month, so like the general fund right now is big negative, but of course that's before tax has been receded. And other than that, everything else is the things that are the normal things that were reimbursement basis and that are showing where we have.
Vehicle maintenance
And those are just timing, because we're always a month behind
okay.
until we get to the end of the year when we true that up the accrued amounts that we have to put back to the right year.
All right. It's like I mentioned a while ago, we worked so hard the last 5 years, I don't want to see us. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Annette.
Thank
Anything
you.
else?
You're welcome.
Council, you okay?
Yep.
I appreciate this. Chief.
Speaking of updates,
Stephanie, do you want to switch over that?
so I'm just gonna give you a quick update on the Safer Grant, where we're at. Here, had a lot of people calling, or you're on people on the street, they're asking about, what have you done so far, so I'll kind of go through that and what we're doing with the 6 people. So we kind of already know this stuff. We hired the 6 firefighters. They all started on October 9th. That's the 6 of them there. I don't know if they get the city newsletter and read that, but they're doing bios on, I think 3. They just did 3, and they're going to do the 3 other ones. Won't really talk about them so much, but so once they started the first week, we spent a day doing a bunch of admin stuff, and then they really focused on the EMS operations. So how to drive the ambulance, what our protocols are, where the stuff is, a lot of hands-on stuff that first week. That was the only week they actually worked like a 40-hour regular work schedule. Right after that, they went on to the regular shifts, and that's where they're going to do all their firefighter training. Everybody's required to be a minimum certification of firefighter 2. I think 4 out of the 6 came on as firefighter 2s already, so we can just kind of brush up on a lot of that stuff, which is really nice. Starting October 22nd is when really started counting as shift personnel, so that's when we increased our minimum staffing to 11. So what are we doing with them? I talked about this when we applied for the grant, when we accepted it, but really the gist of the grant was to get you to satisfy the requirements of NFPA 1710. So we increased our staffing to 11, and with the 11 on duty and 4 from West Burlington on automatic aid, we should get to the 15 firefighters for a structure fire, which is great. And then also that allows us to have an engine and an ambulance most all the time respond on a fire call together. We need those 4 people together to do 2 in and 2 out for safety reasons. So, and it allows us to get 4 people in 4 minutes or less. Those are all components of the and then the most important part, or what I think is the biggest part, is staffing a 3rd ambulance. So what we're doing with that is during the daytime hours, so from 8 o'clock till about 6 o'clock or maybe a little later in the evening, there's an ambulance stationed in West Burlington, and it's backed into their station. And then after that, they go to Burlington Public Works, and they're parked inside there. Those are a couple of the new guys there. They're doing smoke detector installs in that picture there. So why do we need a 3rd ambulance? I'm not going to go through all the call volume. We've talked about that over and over, but I would say we're on record-setting pace with our call volume. The last 3 months, we're up to an average of 463 calls a month, which is just, we've never seen anything like that. It's not unusual to have 3 ambulances out. And before, when we had 3 ambulances out, you basically had to shut down an engine. So you'd be down to 1 engine staffed in the city. So that's the nice thing about 3 staffed, is that never happens. Keep the ambulances in their assigned area. So you get to keep those crews together. It's nice to have an ambulance not have to go from, say, Summer Street Station to the north side of town because Station 1's already out on a call, or to go to West Burlington or wherever. So keeps them in their assigned area. Definitely reduces response times. From August to September, Station 2, the Summer Street ambulance, was out of its own territory over 100 times. So 50 times per month or a couple times per day. It's usually down here covering Station 1 or somewhere else. That's in addition to their regular calls. And again, why do we need a 3rd ambulance? This is a big part, is to respond to areas of Burlington that are not currently served well by, basically by our station locations. And I was looking through some different things. Back in the 90s, Chief L had made plans for a 3rd West Side fire station. And in there, he said we need to build a station, or if we could, he said, combine with West Burlington, then their station would be a satisfactory location. So I just thought that was neat. Even back in the 90s, he was looking ahead to. I need to cover this West Side map here. If I can make this pointer work. So that's the West Burlington Fire Station. This dark green is all Burlington city limits. All of that dark green is better served by that station location than by our other 2 fire stations. So it's about a 1/3 of the city. You can actually cover better by putting an ambulance in. So that's why we kind of picked that location. It's one that's worked out well for us. The next one, so in the evening we move over to Public Works, and that is that right there. All of that dark, I don't know what that color is, but that came from GIS. He's great at making us maps, but all that color is better served other two fire stations, so, whoops, oh, how did I do that? I just wanted to show you these. So the other thing on here, these are all of our calls since May 1st. We started a new reporting software, so we can export those calls to a map in GIS. At first I thought, well, it looks like a lot of calls, but it doesn't really look like a lot of calls, and the reason for that is it only shows one little icon for each address. So there's some, like, 2830 Weingard Drive, which is better served by West Burlington or Public Works. So Autumn Heights, it actually had, since May 1st, it had 68 calls. We only had one icon on the map, so you could have to add 67 more little dots in there. And there's a lot of other addresses, like the skilled nursing facilities, assisted living, those account for a lot of calls. So when people ask me, why are we in West Burlington? That's kind of what I tell them, because we actually cover the city of Burlington really well from there. These are actual response time examples. So we don't have a lot of data from West Burlington because we haven't been able to staff it on a regular basis. But 4925 West Avenue, that would be Rosebush, I believe. It's one of those assisted livings out there. So from Central Station, it takes us about 9 minutes is our response time. That's from calls we've actually taken. Station 2, I know different times, but usually 7 to 9 minutes, and that really depends on the time of day and you're going up through Roosevelt traffic, Mason Road traffic. And then from West Burlington, it's about 5 minutes. So a great decrease in response time. 3000 Mount Pleasant Street, that's the bakery or now. So obviously from West Burlington, you're like just down the street. So it's 2 minutes, and that includes from when we get the alarm, so the guys are actually getting up, going out, getting dressed, or whatever they have to do, getting on the ambulance and driving there. It was a 2-minute response time. From Central Station, 7 minutes. Station 2, 9 minutes. Surrey Road was one that's up there off of west of Roosevelt. Not a whole lot of calls there, but we did have one that we ran from West Burlington. That was about a 3-minute response time. Compared to if you had to take that same call from Station 2, it's 9 minutes. Then 2830 Weingard, lots of calls from there. Again, a real short response time from West Burlington. So this is the question I was getting. Are we doing this for West Burlington's sake, or does this benefit West Burlington? Yeah, it really benefits West Burlington a whole lot. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We're right there in their city. We're averaging somewhere around 40 calls there a month already. So for those 40 calls, I mean, you're a minute or two away from there. You're cutting at least 5 minutes off the response time from coming from Central. If you were coming from the Summer Street station, you're cutting 7 or 8 minutes off the response time. So yeah, it's a great benefit to West Burlington. I guess if I lived there, I'd probably be doing whatever I could to keep that ambulance in there 24/7. But right now, there's just no way for us to have guys waiting at a conference room table for 24 hours. It's probably not gonna work. So they stay there as late as they can, and they do other things while they're there. They help train their guys. They sit in on classes, get West Burlington guys familiar with our ambulance and that kind of thing. So I kind of talked about that. The automatic fire aid is a question I've had. How does this affect automatic aid? Well, for now, when we go to West Burlington on a fire call, we send an ambulance and an engine from Station 2. That's because an engine only has 2 people on it, so we have to send the ambulance along with. If we have an ambulance already out there, we just send the engine from Central Station. So that crew out there is going to be probably the first unit on any fire scene in West Burlington. So they don't have an engine, but they have their gear. They can do all kinds of stuff ahead of time, locate hydrants, locate the fire inside the structure. If it turns out not to be anything, they can call off the resources that are showing up. So it'll be great for that. A lot of EMS calls in West Burlington probably won't even require a response from West Burlington. A lot of lift assist or non-emergency EMS calls, they'll show up and call West Burlington off. So yeah, it's a huge benefit to West Burlington. One other thing is it also benefits all the other communities. And by that I mean, if we're not taking the ambulance from Central Station and run it all the way out to Danville. Now we use the ambulance that's in West Burlington. Taking the ambulance from Station 2 and running over to Illinois or that out to Danville, that gets to be a really long response time when you're going from Summer Street out to Danville. So now we're a lot closer to those calls. So all the towns really benefit from us having a third staffed ambulance. And that's what we're doing with the guys, and we're doing that right now. So in another month or two, we'll have a lot more data to share and good stories on how it's worked out.
I was surprised that you were able to find 6 qualified people so quickly.
Well, we didn't hire 6 paramedics, which we would love to hire 6 paramedics, but there's not 6 paramedics. And that is across the state. We're trying to get paramedics in the door, but it's a highly competitive world when you're talking about paramedics. So the thing that it did allow us to do is hire 6 great guys, some that we may not have given a chance to otherwise, because they're great people and they already have great jobs, and you don't normally get people like that to apply for jobs.
24 hours.
Yeah.
Off to
Yeah,
48.
24 on, 48 off, yeah.
So if they're stationed at West Burlington and then Public Works, is there a place for them to
Yeah,
sleep?
so Nick allowed us to move into an office out there. We
okay.
made that for an area for them to stay at night. And the Public Works is not deserted at night, but close to it. So I think some people in there overnight. So, and they're able to park their ambulance inside.
Good job, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Good.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. You want to talk about the BNSF?
Sure. Just as a on his topic, with the CTAA, whatever that stands for, I wish I could remember what initials stand for. We have an agreement for service for the greater area. The townships or the towns pay a percentage of our operating costs. So if our net cost for ambulance service for operations is $100,000 and they have 20% of the calls, they pay $20,000 of the operating costs. They also pay a portion of towards our capital equipment purchase. It wouldn't be that pro rata share. It's probably a little shy of that percentage in the formula. One of the things that we probably need to have some discussions about this round, we have a discussion with the CTAA representatives every year about the funding formula. It's all based off of the 12-person staffing for ambulance service. That's staffing 2 ambulances. We're in an environment now based off a call load where we're really moving to 3 ambulances being staffed. And as that occurs, we don't have a formula that will adjust or that's designed to adjust to cover a percentage of 18, an 18-person staff load in the ambulance service. And I think we need to have some communications as we move forward on that. That being said, this first couple of years with the SAFER grant funding, that's not a significant amount difference. It's just a matter of how we were to proceed on the back end of that SAFER funding. If we're keeping that up, where does that fit into our discussions with the CTAA? And I think that everyone needs to have that all in mind. And now, yes, move over to talking about the parking lot. This is up as a topic. Jesse Caston had come earlier in the year along with the developer, prospective buyer of 2 facilities downtown. Eric, what are those 2 buildings?
The Churchill building, former Moto's building, and the Blau and Sons, former Hopefully Yours building.
Correct. And as they were looking at that, they were looking at a need to make that be successful, needed parking for another 110 to 120 spots along with that. We don't have 110 or 120 spots to be able to provide to them. So we're looking at some different alternatives. The two major ones that are really out there that we could look at was a vacant lot that is owned by BNSF adjacent to the, whichever building it is. The other option was to do an expansion of the parking lot immediately south of the former U.S. Bank location. That, I don't know if I didn't ask you this, but that had a cost estimate probably to do an extra 100 spots there, I guess, in the 3-4 million.
Yeah, I think we were 2 to 3 million, something like that.
So, as a perspective, it was going to be a significant amount more than what we'll talk about with this location, and it wasn't preferred by the purchasers of that lot.
Right.
Now, they have not closed on with the purchase of that yet. They're set to need to have that accomplished by the end of the year, at the end of December. That being said, the council had tentatively said that they were willing to at least work with the developer on this. We kind of want to talk about what the terms would be with BNSF. To really go into any negotiations with them, they require us to submit an application to talk. $600 a significant amount, but we did want, or it was $600, right?
Right. Yep.
But wanted to make sure that you all understood what kind of the base terms that we've been given were, and just what your level of desire was to move forward with this.
Right. And I just talked to Jill. She called me back earlier today, so it's good timing. Just a couple of the particulars on this, Eric, if you go to the next slide. The engineer's estimate for that lot that you just saw was around $650,000. It created 140 spaces.
What are you covering with that $650,000? That's the concrete work, sidewalk, sewer, lighting is over 100,000 of that.
Right.
So you have, it's not just paving a lot that you're doing with this.
Yeah, BNSF requires you to put in some fencing, and of course it's got to be wrought iron. So there's some things that we were dictated by BNSF to put in there if we're putting a parking facility. Again, as Jim stated, the application fee is $600. The tentative lease agreement or terms that she threw out earlier today was about $12,000 a year, but they have to do, I guess, more evaluation of what it is and where it is and exactly what those terms would be. So that's what we'd be accomplishing by submitting the application and taking that next step. So.
Is there an environmental impact study that has to be done, or has it been done, or is it necessary, or?
I know that area is being monitored right now for previous issues, but for us to go forward with it, we don't need to do environmental impact. And it's still going to be Burlington Northern's. We'll just be
paving over it anyway.
right.
Kinda had no idea it'd be that kind of money.
If we were going into something on this site, now, I haven't heard definitively, but my guess is that we're talking about at least if it's at that $12,000 a year figure, it's subject to revocation at pretty much any year.
Yeah, I think within 30 to 60, maybe 90 days. I don't remember what the exact day amount was, but it was a pretty quick turnaround.
So you could end up putting a significant investment in this and having the railroad say that they're kicking you out.
Right, and I expressed my concern about that on the phone today, and she said that it had been submitted for flat-out purchase, but that it had been denied, and we could try to go that route, but we've had a couple of different dealings with the railroad, and they're not the most responsive times. They're going through a process that has a lot of steps to it.
There's some.
I don't know that they could come in a year. I don't know that.
Seems like that would be something we'd want more terms on.
Well, I mean, we put all that money in, and then they can just say, we're not gonna lease it to you anymore.
Well, and this is some of the
For what
reason?
reason?
This is some of the negotiation that we can go through to get any farther, we have to submit the application to really have any level of discussion.
Well, you know, it looks like if that were gonna be in there, that they would have to reimburse us a part of the cost of the lot, you know, and that would be like a declining thing every year and protect us for 10 years or something, because that's a big investment. We'll take it over, I mean, you know.
It's reasonable from our point of view.
That all being said, we would like to move forward to at least begin discussions, but we do want you to know what we're getting for some of at least the initial terms of what would happen. In terms of leasing these spots, I think all of them, if not all of them, the majority of them, to the developer. We've talked about not knowing what the final terms are going to be. We've talked about between $45 and $50 a spot. You know, our typical spots in the downtown that are 24-hour rentals are $4. This would be, I'm looking at saying that it would have to be a higher fee. We're putting in a capital investment. We also have that monthly or annual lease payment to try to make sure that we're covering with it too, and it's just a different lot. The developer didn't express any concerns at that kind of figure. The project will not occur without
So that's
having
like
that occur.
$5,600 a month in revenues to us.
Yeah,
So we're talking $60,000 a year.
yeah.
Minus 12,000 RDs, right?
And that service has to be.
Doesn't have to be concrete, but I think that's what the developers were looking for.
I think by our standards,
Yeah, it has to be a hard paved surface.
Yeah.
yeah.
So in 10 years,
We're not making money on it in 10 years, but now, that being said, looking at the other option, the spots over on doing a parking deck, if that's $2 to $3 million, and that's if that's that price, we're not going to get that paid off. We can't charge enough to pay for that.
Over at Maine, yeah, I think it was coming out to where it was going to be a little over 100, yeah. But again, it wasn't in the location that they were looking for. And
I don't think
But
that's
we
even.
Doesn't
wouldn't
even
get
compare
kicked
to
off
this.
of our own land.
That's even,
Yeah.
We're not going to get kicked off of our own land, but it's also a different level of this number up here at 650, but
Right.
it's a lot less than
Than
2 to 3
millions.
million.
But we
What-
just need some protection.
Yeah, what other dealings have we had with leases with Burlington Northern? Have we had any other, not, maybe, obviously not at this level, but have we?
That's their facility, but we're basically a subtenant of the Rutherford building.
Okay.
The Rutherford building is rented by
River Terminal.
Mershman, BRT. Their rental arrangement is the same way. It's a month to month. And so being kicked out, we're in a position where we're subject to being kicked out on a monthly basis from that facility. And it's been that way for years. It's just the way that the standard leasing procedure for the railroad is this.
Here's another question, Jesse. Can we go back to that map? Today, I noticed there was a guy. Is there room? Are they going to leave themselves some rooms to do that type of thing, or are we going to be up as close as we can get?
we would be that hatched area there. What they've asked us to do is give them a 25-foot buffer off of the closest track, and that's all they've said they required. They do store some ties in that area now, but they have storage, in their main yard as well.
Okay. I think we should move ahead. Go for it.
600, I just didn't want to spend the 600 fee if you weren't willing to have it. And it also gives an opportunity for us to talk about this. That being said, is we'll have have to try to see what we can do for negotiations. We don't have a tremendous amount of leverage. They're not looking for funding from us.
No, and I really don't think that we're gonna get a lot out of them, if any, at all.
No, probably not.
I mean, so that's the huge risk. We
But-
basically have to assume that they can,
I like Becky's idea. I mean, it's reasonable.
Right, because if they never do anything, it doesn't cost them anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. But,
But it's logical to us.
or to ask to buy it again, I think
Yeah.
that we should
I think so, too.
make another approach to
Yeah,
it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay.
All right.
yeah.
Eric, do you have anything else?
We're going to be trying to schedule another joint meeting with the Brownfield Group to discuss the catalyst sites. So our sponsor group meets on Monday, and we'll probably be sending out an email to Council and Planning Commission to set something up again. Talk a little more detail on those 3 sites that they were doing a little more planning on.
Anything?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Just can't think of anything right now.
Okay. Are you on KBR this one?
I'm on KBUR this week.
Trick or treat tomorrow night, I guess.
Oh,
that-
is it trick or treat tomorrow?
Yes, from 5,
But the whole city went to.
yes, 5:30 to
Down at the auditorium, what do you,
What is
do you
the-
call
yeah.
that trunk or treat? Or no? Safe trick or
Safe
treat.
trick or treat. Yeah.
Great.
Safe
5:30?
trick or treat at the auditorium from 5:30 on. Citywide from 5:30.
5:30 to what?
7:30, I think it's listed.
5:30 to 7:30?
Is it? Yeah. 'Cause of-
Jim?
Just would mention, this year's budget, we're probably not going to hit what we had hoped to hit on this year's budget. It's gonna probably, that'll be the, if that's the case, it'll be the first time, that, since that the general fund has. No, we had that also come up on the dashboard. Second time. We had a whole series of events that happened that year with things that there were shortfalls. And we're seeing some of the same things right now. Hotel motel has continued to trend lower. The last report for August was again another 16% year-over-year decline. Local sales tax year, but we were told from the state that there was significant slowdown as we tailed off the year. So that's one that I'm not sure what the projection's gonna be, but it's not trending the right direction. Within the general fund itself this year, I don't know how we're gonna end up on the auditorium. We're not gonna end up performing the budget. We're closing out one contract with Venue Works, and we have closeout costs on that were contractually written in that add over a month, 6 weeks of personnel costs in addition to the regular 6 months. Contract that's front-loaded with additional cash out. This year is not going to do well on the auditorium side. As we move forward, we've gotten numbers from the pension systems, the 411 system, instead of having an audit decline of 0.5% or a little more from last year into next year, we're seeing about a 0.5% increase. IPERS, our contribution to that has gone up about a 0.5%. Those together have an annual cost to the general fund of about $75,000. So that's something that we already weren't going to be looking to be in a good position moving forward. Is going to be a difficult one. Just the idea of what's going to happen specifically as we get to the third year of the SAFER grant with our existing staffing, we're going to have budget challenges, and the change in those funding formulas, the change in potentially things that are hitting at us. Those are all negatives or headwinds on a funding environment moving into the future. That's not to notwithstanding, would encourage you all to make contact with your representatives at the state level. State is a significant budget moving into this next session. One of the items that is of major concern for cities is what happens with backfill. Backfill is over $440,000 annually that we receive. A cut in that, elimination of that would be pretty not without making some major changes or seeing some significant increase in whether it's taxes or fees or something to try to maintain service. And those will be some big decisions that have to be made potentially depending on how the rest of this cycle comes into this next year. I just want to make sure people are understanding there was a reason why, a very good reason why we should be looking at different areas for making cuts. We didn't need it for this year, but as you look to the future with some of the things that we've tried to do and now some of the things that are outside forces that have an impact on us, it will be, I think it will be challenging. My staff likes it when I do that. They say I end almost always positive. And I guess that's all the better I can do for you for tonight. Nothing. I got nothing. Oh, Nick.
Of its traffic control tomorrow. As you notice, the barriers have been removed. So the traffic will get switched to the outside lanes of its normal travel, and then cones will be put back up. And I think Jesse said that as soon as Friday, they may be pouring back the center turn lane, at which point we'll let the clear time happen, then the traffic control will be removed, and the street be open. We still have some work to do. The intersections have to be reconstructed, but seeing as we're sitting probably mid-November before that's open, we don't want to start opening up the intersections and have to deal with winter activities. The contractor still will probably be moving forward. Sidewalk work north side of the road. There's driveways that need some work too. So they may do some of those smaller type tasks so they don't get themselves exposed. Also, so we don't cause some traffic problems with Broadway and West Burlington Avenue, severing West Burlington off from the rest of the community. But Jefferson Street is going well. I noticed that a couple of trees moved. They were fairly large, and the root balls would have probably caused problems down the road for future removal. So I would say we're looking pretty good on that. There probably will be a little change order coming. I don't know if I think I maybe explained this before. The F&M Bank's vault sticks out into the right of way a little bit, and so the one parking spot will be removed and replacing it there. But other than that, that's all I got.
Are the street lights on in that block yet?
No, and they won't be until the electricity is put back. That's the unfortunate part with that circuit through there. Jesse might know more about that. I was gone 3 days last week, so I don't know if they're back on or not. But come before you yet this winter. It'll probably happen simultaneously as the intersections at the rest of agency are being worked on. That you'll see some of that work begin.
The snowplows look good.
Yeah, they're on display. I forgot about that. My snowplows are on display out in the front.
I saw them today.
I think there's one more that's got to get picked up. Hopefully it'll cost me but I wanted to be able to show them to the people since City Day was canceled.
I hope they look that good at the end of the season.
Well, I hope there's no snow. That's my hope.
Yep.
So.
Hey, Nick, you could give some other piece of good news. You and 2 other employees took a trip last week. Would you like
Yeah.
to talk about what you did?
Myself, Major Kramer, and then Tim Myatt went down to St. Louis. I think we've spoken to the past, our community listening. It's a communications-based training through Barry Waymiller. It's a nonprofit organization. It is 3 days of understanding kind of your behaviors and who you are as a person, and understanding the communication styles that you go through, and then you learn a different set of communication skills. I think what the stories taught. I think this is the 7th or 8th person that's gone through the training, and actually Mr. Freitag, who's in my department, has been working with some other organizations in town, and I believe that they have a contingency from Our Community Listens coming up here to do a presentation.
It'll be sometime in November.
I think it's November 17th. But,
I can't remember the date.
but I think that information you let you know. I think it's a good training. You know, we had a good conversation on the way back on the impact that I think it could have, not only for our organization but for the community. So,
Thank you.
yep.
That's the best I can do on the good news side, so. I do want to say that is have put into those kind of things to make sure that they understand themselves. That's a big deal, but how do you make sure that you are communicating in a way that has an impact and is relevant to the person that you're communicating with? And you can't get that until you understand yourself. So for the folks who put the time into doing this, it is work days, but they're separated from family for 4 days, and they still have to come back and get caught up on all the things that they were still responsible for. So it's a significant commitment that I'm really appreciative of having a staff that's willing to do.
One more item before we go.
There's 7.
5:30 to 7, okay. Right here in the council chambers, and it'll be on streaming live, so you can catch it at home too. Important time, folks, important time. We done?
We're done.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff.